All right, let's go ahead and get started. Now, when we hear the word mysticism, different unique visions come to mind. The ascent up the tree of life of the Kabbalah in Judaism, the whirling dervishes of Rumi in Islam, the Apostle Paul's blinding light upon the road of Damascus in early Christianity, the stigmata of St. Francis of Assisi and the visions of Hildegard of Bingen in Catholicism. How about the hesychast prayers of the faithful in Eastern Orthodoxy, the spiritual ascent of the Bodhisattvas of Buddhism and the gurus of Hinduism, the ecstatic utterances of the Pythia in ancient Greece and Rome, right? And the spirit possession of shamans, witch doctors, and wise men from all over the world. The idea of mysticism appears to mean different things to different people at different periods of time. But are these ideas really so unique, so different? What are the connections between them all in the realm of their shared phenomenology, their perceived union and ultimate reality through ecstatic and intuitive experiences? Today, or this evening, I should say, we will venture into the cornucopia of mystical experiences throughout history within different beliefs and religions, dancing upon topics that are often never discussed, and realizing threads of connectedness that may redefine your understanding of what mysticism is all about, and perhaps you may have a mystic-like epiphany of your own. So I'm going to start with a theoretical experience. Okay, so or maybe it's real, who knows? So one day, as you sit quietly in your favorite chair or comfy sofa, perhaps even munching on one of your favorite sandwiches or sipping one of your favorite beverages, you suddenly hear this shout from on high. Startled, you notice the room around you instantly bathed in blinding light as you feel yourself lifted from your chair, from your room, from your house, even from your city, rising higher and higher, further and further up into the sky, moving beyond this planet, beyond the solar system, beyond the galaxy, beyond even the furthest stars, to a place where no one has gone before. Or maybe they have, but you didn't get the memo. Reality seems to divide like some mystical veil or curtain as you rise into realms residing in between regions of the unexplainable, the unfathomable, the ineffable. And there's light, so much light. It surrounds you, embraces you, becomes you as you move into its radiance, a light beyond comprehension, and yet comprehending all. As the light knows all, you begin to know as well. Begin to understand the whys and the hows of life. You hear words revealing mysteries of ages past and times yet to come. You see visions that challenge the entire construct of reality. Visions open up vistas of understanding never achieved before. Questions of the past now become mere child's play, mere scribbles of graffiti upon the temporal parchments, as compared to the real solid golden tablets you now see that are inscribed with spiritual answers that could never be realized through your earlier inquiries. Then, all at once, you're back sitting in your home, in your chair, with your favorite sandwich or beverage all over the floor, and you think to yourself, what the hell? Or heaven, it just happened. Is it possible you have just had a mystical experience? Or maybe your coffee's just gone bad. Maybe you're suffering from one of those mental disorders. Heck, maybe you just fell asleep in your chair. It's possible, right? But it was so real, too real. And you recollect things, great things, fantastic things that have transformed your outlook in life, right down to your fundamental beliefs regarding the very nature, the very fabric of reality itself. You could have pinched yourself during that epiphany and would have felt a very tangible rather than metaphysical ouch. In fact, you've never been so excited in your entire existence. So naturally, you want to tell someone, but who's going to believe you? Now, we run into 6 types of people that scholars have determined of religion. After you had this wonderful experience, perhaps you're having it right now. I don't know. So 6 types of people. Let's take a look at these people. You quickly discover 6 kinds of people. Now, the first one, they will listen to you with their eyes wide, with very apparent concern. Well, they will always come up with some rational explanation for what happened, no matter how much metaphysical evidence you give them. Science, not spirituality, best explains all things, and the two are forever separated by this invisible barrier. Your vision just might be the result of that bit of undigested beef at the pit of your stomach, or, of course, you could be clinically insane. Possibly. The second will listen to you and not be concerned so much for what you say, but how what you say affects them. It's not the question whether it really happened or not, but, well, what others will think. What will the neighbors say? What will our friends say? Usually, these are family members or peers who are socially connected to you and who in the past viewed connections to you as advantageous for themselves. Of course, now that you had your little mad vision, this is no longer the case. They'll now wonder what the neighbors will think. It's no longer keeping up with the Joneses. It's trying not to look like the Jim Joneses. Sorry, bad joke. And your boss may somehow forget you worked there, accidentally replacing you with somebody else. That happens. The third will hear just one word that sounds out of the ordinary, just a tad bit on the outer rim, and will immediately make a presupposed cultural or religious conclusion and run away from you like you are a plague victim trying to infect them. Anathema, right? They may have some vague ideas of what they believe is true or not. But like the second person, they fear the possible effect upon themselves from peers and those they deem as having higher authority in this area, and will quickly remedy the situation by removing you from their lives. You have just been eliminated. The fourth will listen to you and judge you accordingly, believing you are in a position of authority. They are, a position of authority to do so because of their encyclopedic knowledge of the topic. They constitute the recognized and established societal authority on religion. Some of what you say may have some validity in their eyes, but some of what you say may be viewed as incorrect, even heretical by what they learned. And so it becomes their job to censor your views, to maybe, perhaps, to either gently instruct you back to perspectives considered valid from their doctrinal position, or to harshly criticize you to either change your views or to be thrown out of their establishment so you don't, influence others. It all depends on the authority of who hears your story. If verbal force is not enough for some of the more belligerent types, there's always a good supply of other kinds of force. They are all about keeping up the status quo. Right. But the fifth person will listen to you with an open heart and will believe in what you say because they know you are speaking with sincerity, and will rejoice with you and will often view your experience as not only valid, but as either reflecting a deeper truth within the already established doctrines, or as having some possible independent authority. Perhaps they may have had some of the same experiences themselves, or perhaps they just know deep down inside that you are right. Finally, the sixth person will believe in whatever and everything you say and will blindly follow your words because you are their ultimate authority of what goes on in the spiritual realm. You could say that God is the Pillsbury Doughboy, and they will believe you. These types are often called the Kool-Aid drinkers. Does this all sound crazy? Does this all sound impossible? Could such an experience take place, or for those who hold to the first-person perspective, be conceived as possibly being believed? Of course, the answer is yes. Now, of course, I made it very digestible, but what I did is I read a whole bunch of materials on this, and then I kind of brought down to the story form of reactions. These are the stereotypes. In fact, most religious systems covered with such types of mystical experiences and the resulting beliefs made manifest after encounters with the ultimate or with something beyond themselves. Whether it's Moses, let's go to the first image so we just see something kind of pretty. Whether it's Moses talking with God upon Mount Sinai, Jesus with his three close apostles upon the Mount of Transfigurations, or Muhammad receiving his first revelation from God through the angel Gabriel within the cave of Hira on Mount Jabal al-Nur. All of these perceived encounters with the divine are considered part and parcel of mysticism or the mystical experience. Those who had these experiences often faced the exact, doesn't sound familiar, the exact same six types of people. And they always were in the thick of the conflict between mystical experiences and doctrinal or creedal authority. They are often, think about Jesus, right? And in relation to Judaism. Think about Muhammad in relation to the tribal beliefs that are around him, right? Think about Zoroaster and the reaction of those who are practitioners of the various tribal beliefs in and around the areas of Eastern, as well as Afghanistan, Eastern Persian, Afghanistan. Think about all these founders, and you realize, whoa, wait, think of Mahavira, think of Buddha, and you go, wow, you're right. Okay. So at first, mysticism often begins the formation of the doctrinal or creedal authority. That's how these beliefs started in the first place. Typically, mysticism plays a role in igniting that first spark. Let's go to me again. Igniting that first spark, the initial encounter with the other that basically gets the ball rolling, right? Interpretation then often follows the mystical experience, asking questions concerning what just occurred and why. And if this mystical experience gains widespread acceptance or a consensus of some kind as a result of an accepted interpretation or set of interpretations, right? The next question is how the individual or the group is to apply the insights gained via this mystical experience. Eventually, this mystical moment or perceived mystical moment becomes part of the basic structure of the religious system. It becomes part of its doctrine or dogma. While the acceptance of the 10th commandment seems to be an almost instantaneous revelation, of course, there are many who argue the contrary, or the acceptance of the book of Revelation, the de facto mystical New Testament book, right, took generations for many within Christianity to validate. In fact, it wasn't fully validated by many until the 4th century CE. So what exactly is mysticism? Well, the definition, the exact origins of the word mysticism. Well, first of all, let's go to a general phrase here. Let's go to the next image. What is mysticism? Definition of mysticism, according to Evelyn Underwood, which we'll mention later on, mysticism is the art of union with reality. The mystic is a person who has attained that union in greater or less degree, or who aims at and believes in such attainment. But, next slide, what is reality? From this definition, only a mystic can answer, and in terms which can only other mystics can understand. What is union? From the mystic's perspective, it is not an operation, but an activity which is being done. Every conscious moment of time with great intensity and thoroughness, we can know a thing by unity with it. At least this is what she says. But let's delve a little deeper. Let's go back to me. Let's go down the rabbit hole. Let's go into the ancient Greek. The exact origin of the word mysticism may be as mysterious as the idea it represents. According to most scholars, mysticism stems from the Greek word mystikos, derived from the verb myeio, which means to conceal. By the Hellenistic age, the word mystical often referred to secret religious rituals and often applied, as the word Mayan indicates, to the concealment or the closing of the lips and eyes in connection to the sacred oath of the initiates, of the mystis. Naturally, it follows that those who practice a form of mysticism are then called mystics. So we go, all right, that's great, Dr. Rietveld. Let's move on to something else. Let's go to, Webster has not failed us yet. Let's go to Webster's dictionary. Let's go flip over there. According to Webster's dictionary, mysticism is the experience of mystical union or direct union with ultimate reality that is neither apparent to the senses nor obvious to the intelligence. I don't know. I think you're failing us now. Sorry. I'll say it again. The experience of mystical union or direct union with ultimate reality that is neither apparent to the senses nor obvious to the intelligence. Sometimes it is apparent to the senses and it is obvious to the intelligence, but sometimes it's not. That's problematic. Let's go to number 2. It is also relating to or resulting from an individual's direct communion with God or ultimate reality. Like, for example, the experience of the inner light. A little better. We do have, you do have almost of a theological bias there, but you do have this ultimate reality. That's fair. I would add maybe perhaps gods as well. Gods, but number 3, based on a subjective knowledge of God as intuition and insight. And number 4, the belief that the direct knowledge of God, spiritual truth, or ultimate reality can be attained through subjective experience of intuition and insight. I always have problems with the word subjective, objective. We'll go there in a little bit. Notice here that the use of the word subjective occurs twice at the end of this definition. Hence, the mystical experience, while very real to the individual or individuals experience it, is still considered by Mr. Webster as subjective rather than an objective experience, meaning that mysticism in and of itself is not a phenomenon that can be placed into a lab or measured or even quantified scientifically in a completely objective manner. As a result, those outside the initial mystical epiphany have a choice to make with deciding whether this experience is valid or not. Because of these subjective factors, faith often becomes a key to acceptance. Faith in either the individual communicating the message, right? Number two, faith connected to a particular scripture or doctrine that collaborates with this numinous encounter, or, and including maybe, number three, faith based on a particular sign or signs occurring currently to the announcement of this experience. So you have that. Well, you could see where a subjective individual mystical experience can become problematic for those particular religious systems which already have very well established rules of belief, especially if the mystical experience radically adds or subtracts what has already been accepted through a long established tradition. Or sometimes what happens is it breaks away and becomes another religion or another aspect of that religion. So in a sense, from Judaism, Christianity branches out. From Protestant Christianity, Mormonism branches out. Is this making any sense right here? Now, according to Groyler's Encyclopedia of Knowledge, mysticism is, I'm going to another one by Mr. Webster. He says, Groyler says, a direct and immediate experience of the sacred. I like that one. Once again, it's a direct and immediate experience of the sacred and the knowledge derived from such an experience. That's a good one. That is really a good one. Within Christianity, it is the vision and sense of union with God, maybe. Within Buddhism, it is a sense of union with non-theistic forms. That's fair. And mysticism is usually accompanied by, says Groyler, meditation, prayer, and ascetic discipline. And may be accompanied by unusual experiences. What kinds of unusual experiences? Ecstasy, levitation, visions, power to read human hearts, healing, ability to perform often unusual acts. Of course, meditation, prayer, and ascetic discipline are central tenets to both Western and Eastern monasticism. They are, whether Christian, Buddhist, or otherwise. And it's not surprising that the mystical experience is often the focus of these monastic pursuits. Also, under this definition, we see the kind of signs that may reveal to the observer that the person's mystical experience is a true one. The most noteworthy being the gift of healing and the ability to perform unusual acts. We see this quite a bit, for instance, in the various acts of the saints. Now, of course, the miracle worker was quite common in antiquity, and most people figured their ability derived because of their close or intimate connections with the supernatural realm. Hence, Jesus or Apollonius of Tyana must be close to the deity or deities or powers that be, because they were allowed to perform miracles, to break from the natural world and superimpose upon it a seemingly supernatural one. If they're able to do so, they must, according to this view, have some direct form of communication with the supernatural world and even its organizing principles. This type of connection is at the very core of what mysticism is all about. Now, one of my friends way back when, named Lori, jokingly told me that before going on one of my radio programs to discuss mysticism, she had said, I hope you are in deep meditation, levitating in the full lotus position. In fact, you should be doing that while on the air, unquote. I suppose she wanted me to rise to the occasion. Maybe this is the only occasion where lightheadedness is a good thing. Or maybe it's inner lightheadedness. Okay, I'll stop. I was only trying to keep everybody up. For many Eastern expressions of mysticism, especially within Hinduism and Buddhism, levitation is part of the metaphysical package. The yogi often levitating as they enter into a mystical state. Of course, many don't realize that levitation is reported occurring amongst many famous Christians of note, while they too were in a mystical state, including Hildegard of Antwerp, Catherine of Siena, Teresa of Avila, and Ignatius of Loyola. You didn't know, did you? Naturally, I should say, or supernaturally, I should say, levitation is read as a very definite sign of union with the ultimate. As for a scientific explanation, well, many say it's either a trick or has to have a rational explanation. Some physicists believe this power is actually within the biological brain, so that's, if you want to go there, that's fine. Greuler goes on to say that mysticism is defined in action by three attributes. First of all, the experience is immediate and overwhelming, divorced from the common experience of reality. My little story at the beginning of the talk kind of illustrates that, just completely, it comes upon you all at once. Second, the experience or knowledge from it is felt to be self-authenticating without need of further evidence or justification. You know it happened to you because you experienced it. Anybody telling you differently goes against the very grain, the very fiber of who you are, because you did so fully experience it. And if you're trying to get yourself not to believe it, then you really do think you're going crazy. See how that works? And next, and finally, third, the experience itself is said to be ineffable. Its essence incapable of being expressed or understood outside. Yeah, very difficult, right? You can't fully have the words to say. In fact, you're thinking, wow, why are we talking about experiences we can't relate with outside of common religious lineages? No, this is actually within even major religions. Our hypothetical mystic at the beginning of the talk experienced all these attributes, right? And yet there are so many others that have historically described such an experience that I just mentioned. For instance, this will throw you off, even the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians 12, 1 through 6, speaking in third person about himself. I always wonder, why would somebody talk in third person about themselves? I don't know. Dr. Rietveld sincerely doesn't really think that way, but oh well, maybe he's wrong. Anyway, so the Apostle Paul says as follows. He says, I must boast, not that it is profitable, but I will go on to visions and revelations of the Lord. He says, I know someone in Christ who, that's being him, who 14 years ago, whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know, God knows, was caught up to the third heaven. And I know that this person, whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know, God knows, was caught up into paradise and heard ineffable things, which no one may utter. About this person I will boast, but about myself I will not boast, except for my weakness. Although if I should wish to boast, I would not be foolish, for I would be telling the truth. But I refrain so that no one may think more of me than he sees in me or hears from me. You gotta love the dance there, right? So now let's refer to Greuler's main attributes listed above. Certainly, this experience is immediate and overwhelming, divorced from the common experience of reality, as Paul was caught up in such a way that he wasn't even sure if he was in his body or not. Next, even though Paul is trying hard not to boast, his experience or knowledge from it is still felt to be self-authenticating, without need of further evidence or justification. He just knows he was caught up into the third heaven, and according to Jewish thought, the highest heaven. He himself claims he was in paradise, that blissful abode within the very courts of heaven itself. Now, this connection to the third heaven and paradise is also evident, by the way, in the Apocalypse of Moses. As for the experience itself, being held as ineffable, It's essence and capable of being expressed or understood outside. Paul himself explains that he heard ineffable things which no one may utter. So that kind of works with this, right? In fact, later on in the 2nd century, the famous thinker Clement of Alexandria studied Paul's mystical experience at length, determining that the unutterable words was intimating the impossibility of expressing God and indicating that what is divine is unutterable by human power. Furthermore, because Paul begins to speak of the third heaven, Clement determined it is lawful to initiate the elect souls into mysteries there. All right. So, oh, wow. So you didn't know. So you have this definition, the classic Grower definition, really in there in the New Testament. According to the, why don't we just go all different sources? According to the New Advent Catholic Encyclopedia, we might as well. Mysticism, according to its etymology, implies a relation to mystery. In philosophy, mysticism is either a religious tendency and desire of the human soul towards an intimate union with divinity, or a system growing out of such a tendency and desire. As a philosophical system, mysticism considers as the end of philosophy the direct union of the human soul with the divinity through contemplation and love, and attempts to determine the processes and the means of realizing this end. This contemplation, accordingly, is not based on mere analogical knowledge of the infinite, but it is a direct and immediate intuition of the infinite. So it's right there. So we got a lot of interesting bits and pieces here, but let's go a little bit further. Let's consult some other people. So let's go to the next image. So here we have Gregory of Nyssa, one of the famous three Cappadocians who lived from 335 to 394. He says, "Since with all my soul I behold the face of my beloved, therefore all the beauty of his form is seen in me." Since with all my soul I behold the face of my beloved, therefore all the beauty of his form is seen in me. What does this mean? What does this mean? Well, for Gregory of Nyssa, the mystical experience with God was one of a lover eternally in pursuit of their beloved, and in that journey, transforming from the material into the spiritual world. This deity was beyond comprehension, yet that endless light filled the vessel of the worshiper so that they too glowed with that sacred light. This was viewed as evidence of this mystical experience, especially amongst in the Eastern Christianity. The idea is if you had a mystical experience, then it would be possible that you will definitely be glowing, literally to the naked eye. People will glow. You do have some scholars who say this idea of glowing or eminence is a source for the idea of a halo, right? But you have so many early Christian writings from the Greek and East, as well as the Syrian East, as well as Coptic writings that talk about this idea of glowing from or as a result of this mystical experience. It is a participation in this. Let's go to the next one. That's right. Florence Nightingale. Did you know that she was a mystic? For what is mysticism? It is not the attempt to draw near to God, not by rites or ceremonies, but by inward disposition. Is it not merely a hard word for the kingdom of heaven is within? Heaven is neither a place nor a time. What is going on here? While she was known as the Lady of the Lamp, who helped the British soldiers during the Crimean War, she was also a mystic, believing she was directly called by God to do her special work, taking care of and helping others. She saw no division between science and the spiritual world, which was imbued, she believed, with a higher intelligence. Nightingale believed we all possessed an inner divine nature, and with both realization and effort, we could all harmonize our personal selves with this inner God consciousness. She says, extending the limits of the divine in man, unquote. And so, as a result, we evolve. Rites and ceremonies, she believed, were merely outward trappings of the real work within that involved a very active sense and very well nourished sense of mysticism. So this is her definition and understanding of what it is. Let's go to the next image. And then we got William James. William James, 1842 to 1910, and his Varieties of Religious Experience, which he published in 1902. He says, by its nature, as a personal occurrence, mystical experience cannot be defined in an absolute and universal way, although there are some general attributes. The experience is not usually predictable, and as such may be defined as ephemeral in nature. The experience is often described by the subject as losing a sense of self and being overcome by the other. The subject of a mystical experience is left feeling a heightened insight or knowledge. In a sense, it is a noetic and rooted in the mind. So for James, I actually took an entire course at Claremont Graduate University on William James. I got an A. We read all his writings, including this one. For James, mystical experiences are the very essence of religion. For most founders, as he notes, of various religious systems of belief did so through a mystical epiphany. Now, for him, high-level mystical experiences had four qualities. First, they are ineffable, so they defy rational explanation. Number two, they have a noetic quality, so they yield insight beyond the rational and intellectual pursuits. Number three, they are transient. In other words, they don't last very long. Number four, they are passive states, so one feels acted upon rather than being the agent. James, of course, believed in a pluralistic universe, believing there was a reality to all forms of religion and mystical experience. Let's look at me for a few moments. I want to say something about William James here. William James had the ability of driving people crazy with this. So what he would do, because it was very important to him, is that his belief is that there is a pluralistic universe. There is, in a sense, a multiverse of possibilities. And he believed that this universe could be very subjective at times, that what was true in one part of the universe was not necessarily true in the other. So he kind of broke down those consistent Newtonian laws that you have everything being the same everywhere. So it's different places. He says, so above, so below. So the idea is, even here, how people understand spirituality and religion is a very subjective experience based upon their experience. So you can't tell somebody that they're wrong, but you can ask somebody if it works. You see, William James was big on another idea that is known as pragmatism. Pragmatism is the idea that it is useful as long as it shows that it works. Whether it be philosophically or within the physics realm. So as long as it works, then you keep it going. You do that. So the idea is, he had this concept that religion and the religious experiences that you have should have a positive outcome, a positive ethical outcome. Therefore, as a pragmatist, it works. If it does the opposite, makes you fearful, makes you worried about the reality and everything collapsing and so forth, and then for him, it's not working for you. So what happens is that people from various religions will come up to him. He mentions this in his book. Like people who come from a Jewish background. He goes, they talk about their Judaism. He said, "Oh, that's a beautiful belief. And does it make you a better person? Does it make you love the world? Does it make you want to help people?" And they're all, "Yeah, it does." He said, "Oh, I love it. That's great." And they go, "So do you want to believe this?" No, no, but I'm glad because it works for you. It's truth for you. Yeah. Or or Muslim will come up and do the same. He go, "I love it. You're a good person." You know, he even mentions indigenous groups and their practices. And if it makes them a better person, pragmatism says, then it's good. Your mystical experiences, are subjective. They're all your own. But if it makes you a better person ethically, it makes you kinder and, more inclusive and everything else, he was all for it. Is he converting over? No. They all thought he was going to convert over to their belief system because he'd be like, "I love it. You guys are doing a great job. Keep it up." Oh, you got to love him. But there you have it. So pluralistic universe, many different possibilities. But so your mystical experiences is, from his perspective, is all your own, but it doesn't make it not valid. And just because it seems to contradict another person's mystical experience, it doesn't make your experience not valid. It just makes it different from this other person whose world, culture, and understanding is different from your own. It's just a different idea. But however, what's right for one person is not necessarily right for another person. And so you got to read this book. It's a great work. It's still in print. It came out in 1902. He died actually 8 years later, but it rocked the boat. Also, William James is one of the founders of something called psychology. So kind of important guy, but I thought I'd mention that to you. Let's go to the next person. The next person is Bertrand Russell. He says that mysticism is, in essence, little more than a certain intensity and depth of feeling in regard to what is believed about the universe. Once again, he was known, actually. He lived from 1872 to 1970. He's a British philosopher. He's a logician. He is known for his theories in logic, in mathematics. I mean, he's a science brain. Yet he believes that mysticism was a sense of mysticism was one of the highest of goods. He believed it. But he said that what makes it really good is that it was important. These experiences are not to be imposed upon others. That mysticism is a truth that reveals itself to the individual. And the individual, and then they receive that special message. It not necessarily has to be imposed on everybody else. And so he said, oftentimes that's a truth, but it's also your personal truth. So next image. All right. Oh, here we go. We got Evelyn Underhill. We came across her earlier. She says, mysticism is the passionate longing of the soul for God. 1875 to 1941. She's an English Catholic writer. She's a pacifist. So for her, mysticism involves a 5-step process. She viewed it. First of all, most individuals who live a life that is of the mystic, they have what's called an awakening. Number one, they become aware of a higher reality. It gives them intense joy and oftentimes this deep, all-abiding love of God or of the divine. Number two, I don't necessarily agree with her, but number two is purgation. We're suddenly, having seen this great light, this great perfection, having this wonderful epiphany, now all of a sudden it makes one confront one's own imperfections. It sheds light on what's wrong with you. And so there's this need now to detach from worldly distractions, often through self-discipline or mortification, whatever it may be. Number 3, she says, is illumination, divine insight, joy. So you're receiving as an individual still understandings, these deep concepts and revelations that ordinarily you would not have coming from somewhere else. Number 4, it's been proverbially used in different contexts. You may have heard this before. It is the dark night of the soul, that there's always seems to be this sense of doubt and desolation and depression. There's a period of time where, you feel like you just can't do it. It's too much. It's too overwhelming. You got this knowledge, you've seen so much, and yet you realize it's not enough, that you are falling short of it. And then number 5 is spiritual union with God. And of course, the idea of the surrender, that you become one with God. And that is an answer in and of itself, that you surrender to this because you realize that you can't do it, reach that perfect state on your own. You must merge with the ineffable. And so that's what she says. Next image. Right, the next one is Frances Parkinson Keys, 1885 to 1970. She's an American author. She's actually a very famous novelist during the 20th century. She says, a mystic is a spiritual realist, a person for whom the invisible is a matter of more or less first-hand experience. So for her, it's, going against the common grain of so many others. She will go, no, they're not. They're the heads up in the clouds. They're the ones who are really the scientific ones in many ways, because they're the ones that want to have practical experience of the divine, of the spiritual realm. They want to put it all on the line and see what this is all about. They want first-hand experience. They don't want to hear it from somebody else. They don't want to hear it from a friend or a neighbor, a priest, a pastor. They want to hear it from themselves. And so for them, that offers a sense of validity. Good. Let's go to the next one. Manly P. Hall. He lived from 1901 to 1990. He's an American writer, astrologer, mystic. He says, when the human race learns to read the language of symbolism, a great veil will fall from the eyes of men. So Hall actually founded the Philosophical Research Society in Los Angeles in 1934. He's known for such works as The Secret Teachings of Ages. For Hall, symbolism was the universal language, illuminating the deeper mysteries of our connectedness. And also, it gives us insights via mystical experience, lifting the veil to reveal the inner mysteries. So what happens for him is that signs and symbols, when mitigated, when understood through the mystical experience, were keys to unlock all the doors. Yeah, sounds very much like the Matrix, and there is some influence there. Next image. Next image, of course, is, yes, Israel Regardie, 1907 to 1985. He's an English-American author, occultist, ceremonial magician. He says, mysticism, magic, and yoga is the means, therefore, to a new universal life, richer, greater, and more full of resource than ever before, as free as sunlight, as gracious as the unfolding of a rose. It is for man and woman to take. So it's really beautiful there. I love that whole full resource than ever before, as free as sunlight. That's beautiful. As gracious as the unfolding of a rose. And it is for man and woman to take. Said from somebody who went from practicing yoga to ceremonial magic, as convinced by Aleister Crowley. That last line but I'm going to go ahead and take it. So there you have it. But But yeah, a very, very important individual. Next image. Simone Weil, French philosopher, mystic, 1904 to 1943. She says, above all, our thought should be empty, waiting, not seeking anything, but ready to receive in its naked truth the object that is to penetrate it. So basically, she believed God's love was so strong, so irresistible, that it drew us across space and time directly to him. But we had to open ourselves up to receive through surrender. The next one, this is a pretty good one. Yeah, you got Alan Watts here, British American writer, environmentalist, Brahmin, self-proclaimed mystic, seeing the most important aspects within connecting with society in regards to our environment, into nature. He says something pretty profound here. He says, inability to accept the mystic experience is more than an intellectual handicap. Lack of awareness of the basic unity of organism and environment is a serious and dangerous hallucination. For in a civilization equipped with immense technological power, the sense of alienation between man and nature leads to the use of technology in a hostile spirit. I agree. To the conquest of nature instead of intelligent cooperation with nature. So mysticism is part of the glue, the individual as well as collective glue that holds us to the understanding or connections to nature. And next image. Milan Kundera, he's a 1929 to 2023 Czech French novelist. He says mysticism and exaggeration go together. A mystic must not fear ridicule if he's to push all the way to the limits of humility or the limits of delight. The mystic, you got to completely go, hey, anything goes. I'm willing to put myself on the line and say goodbye to the ego and just go there. Next image. And of course, Eckhart Tolle will say, rather than being your thoughts and emotions, be the awareness that is behind them. And so obviously a contemporary philosopher, but I had to go all the way to right now. Let's go to the next image. So what theoretical model, where am I going to go with this? And so this is where I'm going to be going to. I wanted to delve into these mysteries, but I found a good pattern that does seem to work for me when it comes to definitions. And that is, of course, Adolf Diesmann. He lived from 1866 to 1937. Hold with me for a while, and you'll see why I'm using him as a good way to approach this topic. So let's get his face off and get my face on as we see me for a little bit more. Okay, so first, according to Diesmann, one has to examine who is doing the initiative. I think there's confusion when it comes to all these definitions, when it comes to who's doing the initiative. And I'm going, that's interesting. But I like what Diesmann says. Who's doing the initiative? First of all, you have what's called anabatic. Anabatic, so it's Anabatic. Anabatic is known as acting mysticism. In this case, a man or woman, a person approaches God. As opposed to being acted upon, then, a person is initiating the action. A lot of these earlier definitions are ignoring that part. But we see this within many world traditions and practices even today. So anabatic is man approaches God. It is the mysticism of performance. It is the striving mysticism. So here the individual is doing the initial action, the movement towards the deity through their own activities, through their own rituals, through their own focus, through their own meditation. That is important for you to know. I like a distinction, and I'm going to keep on with it. Okay, so that's good. The second is kata bhatik. Kata bhatik is reacting mysticism. Reacting mysticism. This is God now, or the gods, or the divine, right? Approaching a person, an individual. It's going the other direction. This is the mysticism in a Christian context of grace. It's a mysticism of divine gift. Here, the deity is initiating the first action. Deisman, it's good. Got that? So you got anabatic and katabatic. Next, Deisman also defines two approaches to mysticism. One is unio. Unio is maybe egocentric, but not in the bad way, the idea. It's oneness with God. It's the loss of human personality in God. It's transformation into the deity. It is participation in the deity. So there are these possibilities, not necessarily all four together or five together, at once. In some cases it is, it just depends. So once again, unio is egocentric, or oneness with God, or loss of human personality in God, transformation to the deity, participation in the deity. The next one is communio. Communio. This is fellowship with God, sanctification of the personality through God or the divine, confirmation of human towards the divine, prostration before the deity. So communio. So we got to really understand there are different kinds of mysticism, but you have to understand in some cases, it's you reaching up. In some cases, it's the divine reaching down, or a combination. In some cases, it's you blending into the one. In others, it's you in connection with others having that same experience. See, that helps a lot of people understand. And you got to take Deisman because it clarifies quite a bit and makes it easier to break down. The communal form of mysticism is obviously more accepted within Western forms of religion than unio, but we'll go into all the exceptions, where the deity is the one that is reaching towards humanity, towards a relationship, and is conceived as separate from the one being reached. Unio mysticism is different, where the individual seeker not only strives towards conforming to the image of the deity, but actually transcends this barrier between human and divine, thereby becoming one with the deity through an actual transformation, or better put, a reincorporation or restoration within the deity. For the most part, while mysticism plays a vital part in the formation of many religious faiths, especially those within Western traditions, in time, when the proscribed doctrine dominates the culture, mystical expressions are often relegated to the periphery. Sometimes, however, so you're going to see this with Christianity, right? Early Christianity is highly mystical, and of course you have tongues and prophecy and so forth. And then all of a sudden, it goes, many in the West will say it goes out of commission at the end part of the 2nd century CE, but there's no reference to it. But all of a sudden, it's not as useful. It goes against now the established doctrine, right? So we can't have these mystical gifts that you cannot seem to relegate cause problems when it comes to the dogma that's being set down, right? So that's kind of what happens. So sometimes, however, entire mystical forms of expressions or movements within the overarching religious system continue to survive. There are exceptions when the mystical aspect still continues to survive in a certain way. For instance, within Judaism, I would be remiss not to mention that the study of the Kabbalah is a very popular aspect of Jewish mysticism today. and it still thrives, more or less, with some sense of agreement. Who can forget the sudden attention the Kabbalah got years ago with Madonna, right? What about the profound mystical writings of Rumi, full of expressions of love and the unquenchable desire to draw ever closer to God? These fill the religious shelves of various bookstores, right, and places. When thinking of Rumi, some of us instantly think of the whirling dervishes spinning about in their sacred dance to God. Both Rumi and the whirling dervishes are part of a mystical movement known as Sufism that is connected to Islam. Within Hinduism, a heavy dose of mysticism can be found both in Vedanta and Kashmir Shaivism. Of course, Christianity has many groups exhibiting mysticism as well as having very charismatic mystics. For instance, the Catholic Church possesses many famous mystics still inspiring and influencing the church today, whether it be William of Thierry, Bernard of Clairvaux, Hildegard of Bingen, Francis of Assisi, Catherine of Siena, Thomas of Kempis, Teresa of Avila, and John of the Cross. The Greek Orthodox also have their own special range of mystics that have gone to the point of approval officially from those clerics, officially from those who watchdog doctrine. And of course, for them, for the Greek Orthodox, it's Basil the Great, Gregory of Nyssa, Gregory of Nazianzus, Dionysius the Areopagite, Maximus the Confessor, and Simeon the New Theologian. So quite a bit. Also, a very mystical practice continues within Greek Orthodoxy that is known as hesychism, which is alive and well. This is a spiritual prayer of meditation upon retiring inward in order to achieve an experiential knowledge of God through what's called theoria, the divine uncreated light of God, as seen by the apostles on the Mount of Transfigurations, can thereby be seen by those who seek to see it today, at least according to many Greek Orthodox believers. They believe the apostles could see this light at the Mount of Transfigurations. So can they through a mystical experience, through their own special quiet time, hesychast. One of the criticisms of mysticism is that these experiences of enlightenment, a divine consciousness or union with God, are available to everyone who is willing to follow the practice or pursuit of a given mystical system. As you can see from this discussion, this criticism can be both true and untrue based on the particular form of mysticism pursued or those who are pursuing it. Those who are part of inclusive religions or spiritualities may believe this to be true, while those part of exclusive religions or forms of spirituality may believe this to be untrue. The question is a matter of perspective and personal belief, and here, as to be expected, the answers are elusive. Beyond full disclosure and description, except for on a personal level, much like mysticism itself, right? So let's delve into ancient mysticism. The inquiry into the roots of mysticism is much the same as the search for the evolution of the human mind. When self-awareness first creeps in to discernment, the direct difference between conscious and subconscious, being awake or dreaming, was not defined until later on. Early humans often perceived their so-called reality as residing somewhere in between. The world was alive with spirits, with energy, as animism was the most prevalent worldview. Of course, in the world where survival was so dependent upon the whims of nature, any possible advantage became a focus of everyday life. Because this all-pervading spiritual element even extended out to the stars, and they changed relative to the seasons, they were believed to have a direct power over the weather, and so needed to be appeased so that the winters would not be too cold, the summers not so hot, and when we get into the time of agriculture, the spring harvest to be plentiful. As a result, evidence for what we call astrology is evident in ancient man, In dreams, people saw those who had died, and so they determined that they must continue on and somehow join that spirit world. We find evidence for ancestor worship everywhere in prehistoric sites. With all these factors at play, early humanity needed to find ways to directly connect with these natural forces and appease them, please them, and manipulate them in ways possible to better their lives so they would not feel so hopeless, so they could somehow make a better, more productive life for themselves. So let's go to the first image here. This right here is a prehistoric rod arc from Altamira. So these cave paintings date from 36,000 to 20,000 years ago. Obviously, this is pretty interesting image here. Specialists labeled, let's go next image. Specialists labeled generically today as shaman were often called upon to enter into communication with the spirit world using practices that Mircea Eliade describes as archaic techniques of ecstasy. By the way, this image here, many scholars say that these represent possible female shaman. So I thought this was interesting. Okay, let's see me for a little bit here. A mystical setting then, and even today within many cultures, is often considered essential for these shamans to achieve the needed consciousness so he or she can travel outside his body to perform their various tasks to benefit themselves and those who called upon them. First of all, rituals are typically performed that are believed to please and appease the spiritual world, often in the forms of sacrifice, but sometimes another kind of magical act. Second, chanting sacred words, often repetitively, is part of creating a trance-like state for the shaman. Third, music was key to getting the shaman into the mood, often through drumming, but other instruments as well. Singing, too, is part of this. Fourth, the physical activities that were pursued by the shaman were to make one enter an otherworldly mindset, whether through dancing and meditation or placing the body in unusual positions. Sometimes these positions were uncomfortable, challenging. Fifth, and ancient as time itself, was the act of burning something to create an atmosphere charged with a prominent scent. This was considered very important to ancient shaman. Six, intoxicants and mind-altered drugs were often used to relax and often open the mind of the shaman. So you have these different ways for shaman to enter into this mystical experience. Because the shaman entered a world connected with the spirits, including the local group's deceased ancestors, he was often expected to, well, die. Yeah, die symbolically to reach the other side and then come back to life, resurrecting in a sense, and so secure himself or herself as the bridge between these two worlds. Sometimes an image was made of him or her and was then ritually dismembered. The spiritual world then was crossed into through the medium of the shaman spirit, giving them supernatural powers too. They were believed to have magical powers, and they were expected to demonstrate these powers to secure the confidence of those who called upon them and who followed them. A shaman was clairvoyant. They often could see into the future. They were invested with the gifts of healing. They could communicate with spirits and ancestors and animals. They're often possessed by various spirit beings who are then able to talk through them, right? Talk through them. They could perform rituals to both bless and curse people and could directly intervene with nature themselves, right? Their supernatural powers extended to the ritual tools they made, the brews they mixed, and the words they used, whether in song or in poetry. A shaman's soul often left the body and traveled about, sometimes taking on the form of an animal. They could also lead others on this spiritual quest. So the Deisman model of Anabatic and Kanabatic mysticism is difficult to apply to a shaman, for at times the spirit will work through them as very separate beings and be perceived as forcing them to provide certain messages, and so are not manipulated. And this is very much the Kabbalistic as well as the communal system. Other times the shaman is very much with the anabatic and unio mode, whereby they seek after and then lose themselves and become one with the spirit world. So it is both. But we move on, because we're going to move on to Eastern mysticism and just a little bit of even modern ideas of mysticism. As mentioned, Deisman's unio mysticism, as opposed to communal mysticism, is where the individual seeker not only strives towards conforming to the image of the deity, but actually transcends this barrier between human and divine, thereby becoming one with the deity through an actual transformation, or better put, a reincorporation or restoration within the deity. Unio mysticism, while important in the West, is really one of the most prevalent forms of mysticism in the East. In some cases, the deity and nature are seen as one. The goal is an experiential unity of the individual mystic with nature. The realized oneness between the subject and the object, with all boundaries between the person and nature vanishing, is a goal. Unlike communal mysticism, in unio mysticism, the person becomes essentially part of nature, not separate from it. Unio mysticism is readily evident in many forms of Hinduism, in Buddhism, in Taoism, in modern paganism, and in various goddess religions, with great stress on the immanence of the deity or nature. As Starhawk states, immanence means that the gods are embodied, that we are each a manifestation of the living being of the earth, that nature, culture, and life in all their diversity are sacred. Immanence calls us to live our spirituality here in the world, to take action, to preserve the life of the world, to live with integrity and responsibility. In many modern systems of paganism, but by no means all, many practitioners differ from many Christians and Hindus, where, while they, like them, seek an ecstatic union with the divine, quite a few neo-pagans and others of New Thought spirituality groups reject the path of austerity and self-denial in order to achieve mystical union. They don't have to suffer loss. They don't have to go through negation of themselves. And instead, they embrace the mysticism as experienced via the senses and physical reality, since the material world, creation itself, is also understood as sacred. And so very close to ancient beliefs and perspectives that we saw with the shamans and others, these belief systems, modern day belief systems, cross over into ancient strategies. Let's take a look at the next image. You see, much like ancient systems, these modern movements, whether it is Wicca or neo-paganism of different types, or New Thought, or whatever it may be, they oftentimes do rely on signs and symbols. This is indeed ancient mysticism. Like, for example, astrology. Astrology is a mystical study that provides insights into a person's life based on the positions of the celestial objects. This is a mystical idea, concept that was part of ancient mysticism. This practice goes all the way back to the prehistoric era and is very embodiment of the meaning of mysticism. The zodiac reveals hidden esoteric and mystical meanings, but they also, through their movements, actually connect to the individual or society. They are viewed as having energy that can be related to or connected to via a mystical experience. So in ancient times, now not all people who are connected to astrology see it as a mystical practice, but many do, and that's the way it was in the ancient world. This is special arcane, special knowledge. Numerology is a type of mysticism that uses numbers from names and dates to reveal personality traits and life paths. And so again, these signs are everywhere. Now, it's interesting because these signs are not necessarily only part of these movements, but numerology, just like astrology, but numerology is very big within Catholicism. So you see this quite a bit. Angel numbers, of course, are numeric sequences that offer spiritual guidance and wisdom based on their unique vibrations and meanings. Once again, I want to bring up that since ancient times, numbers and mysticism are greatly intertwined. You're going to see this kind of mysticism in connection with ancient Egypt or in the areas of ancient Babylon. You'll see these concepts, not necessarily always angel numbers, but numerology. Next image. And then you have tarot, right? Which is tarot is a mystical divination tool that uses 78 cards divided into major and minor arcana to shed light on the past, present, and future. Again, once again, the idea of these are known as divination tools. They have been using cards and various tokens since ancient times, going back pretty far back. And each one, of course, will reveal something. But in many cases, in ancient times and even in modern times, you have to go through a meditative process of the opening of the mind, the opening of the heart, to be able to allow the divination to work for your heart to imprint itself upon the cards or your fate or your destiny, to connect with the cards so your fate or whatever you're supposed to happen comes about. So this is, again, another one. Birthstones are gems that represent each month of the year and are believed to offer spiritual protection to the wearer. Once again, sacred stones. This goes back to ancient times. Pliny the Elder talks about sacred stones. You have this in various ancient writers, Greek and Roman and others. Dream interpretations. Oh, that goes even into Judaism, right? Is the practice of deciphering dreams to gain an understanding of the subconscious mind. This one, dream interpretation, is front and central form of mysticism that we see within ancient Judaism. So there you go. Next image. You didn't know, did you? Now you'll be looking at the Hebrew Bibles again. The chakras, of course, are energy centers located along the spine that aid in meditation and reflect the universal interconnectedness. So again, the chakras go back. So it goes into definitely, literally, inner mysticism with these energy vortices located all the way up the body. Yeah, crystals and gems are used for mystical healing and cleansing practices because of their distinct vibrations and energies. So I know we see this as modern movements, but they are just simply reinterpretations of ancient practices and beliefs that just seem to be part of life today, part of the vast tapestry of who we are. All right, so there you have it. Just a little example. Let's keep on going. Next image. Okay, so Hinduism. With this set, okay, so under the variegated canopy of the religion we call Hinduism, when it comes to mystical forms of expression, we must remember that for the most part, and there is an exception for every general notion, that there exists a transcendent spiritual order that can be perceived and even pervade society and the way of everyday life, but that it is ultimately separate from it. Here, transcendent is the idea that the divine essence, God or the gods in both nature and power, are ultimately independent of the material universe, and so is defined by spiritual rather than physical laws. This means that most of Hinduism is not to be understood as pantheistic, where the divine is viewed as indistinguishable from the material nature. Because of this belief, there does exist possible multiple levels of spiritual attainment to reach the higher spiritual realm, and various practices to achieve this higher state are encouraged, for example, through what is known as the 4 yogas. Next image. According to the Bhagavad Gita, when the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to be well established in yoga. The first path is called the Astanga or Raja Yoga, which is the way of meditation and physical exercise. And so what you do in order, this is a form of mysticism. What you do is you use the vehicle of your body, and through physical activities, this is you still the mirror of the soul in order for it to reflect, in a sense, the divine light, to go through transformations, right? You will go through spiritual changes. So, but you do this through the vehicle of your body. So it is body mysticism in so many different levels. So it is. Okay, next one. The second path is called Karma Yoga, which is the way of selfless work and action. So it's believed that the very action that you do, the very activities you do, will lead to you undoing the negative karma that you have received. And so as a result, it will lighten your load, so to speak, so that when you go through the wheel of life, through samsara, as you come to the time of release, of moksha, you'll have less karma through those positive actions, and you'll move higher in life or be released, as I said, moksha. The third path is called Jnana Yoga, which is the way of wisdom and philosophical research. Once again, though, you have to do mystical, meditative techniques and strategies, but through the idea of through your mind. So get rid of those mental distractions, those hurdles that get in the way of your liberation. And the fourth, of course, is called Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga is the way of love and devotional service, as opposed to the other three, which is the idea of acting upon that which is within, in a mystical sense, to undo karma. This is the focus of love and devotion of something, an object of devotion outside of yourself, moving outside. So through love, emotions are powerful, often all-consuming, appear to have a firmer grasp upon humanity than the power of the intellect, with one of the most powerful emotions being love. And so in the Bhagavata Purana declares, as the waters of the Ganges flow incessantly towards the ocean, says God, so do the minds of the bhaktis move constantly towards me, the Supreme Person residing in every heart. Immediately they hear about my qualities. So these 4 yogas are central to Hindu practices, and they are all forms of mysticism. So mysticism is deeply ingrained within Hinduism. Now, next image, often connected to one's chosen deity mystically, a mantra is chosen, usually incorporating the deity's name, and said over and over again to enter a trance-like, even ecstatic state of consciousness. Here, these experiences are often self-affirming of the perceived reality of the chosen deity and the ultimate eternity of the spiritual realm, as well as the limitations of the material realm. In this state, often the inner light is encountered, energy is felt within the body, and even visions and utterances realized. At times, feelings of euphoria and even a controlled sense of hysteria happen to be part of the mystical experience. Individuals can pursue this course directly, but sometimes a local guru is also pursued and consulted to mystically enter into a state to provide an answer from the god or goddess, or even a priest connected to a particular temple. Next image. Of course, one of the most famous mantras is the Hare Krishna chant that is said over and over again. In a sense, this is a form of bhakti yoga, devotion to Krishna, who is believed to be a manifestation of Vishnu on earth. He uses Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So you see this particular chant right here. And this is done by the group known as the Krishna consciousness, and it is central. But many different religions have some form of central mantra, and we see this to be true even within forms of Japanese as well as Chinese Buddhism. So we see that there. Next image. But when it comes to our own ability to achieve a mystical connectedness with the divine and transcend the mortal coil, the revelations perceived are understood as having limitations. Unlike the Abrahamic religions, because of each individual's personal makeup with the physical realm, their darsana, their visions experienced through their mystical pursuits, are never exclusively true, but must be understood within the diversity of experiences, often equally valid as many others, even if they appear to contradict. Next image. So it is not one size fits all. It is catered to the individual. So once again, we go back to the four different yogas. The idea is, do you follow all of them? Well, you can if you want to, but these different yogas are meant for different dispositions. While you have, of course, the Raja yoga connects to people who are more physically oriented. The karma yoga appeals to people who are more, so busy with day-to-day life. So it is actions, good actions that are woven throughout their everyday life that accounts for shedding this negative karma. For those who are the intellectual, for the scholars, it is Jnana yoga, right? It fits their personality. And for those who are more loving, emotionally based, bhakti yoga. So it is not, again, one size fits all. And so mysticism depends. And you know who would like that and who mentioned that would be William James, right? He went into this fact that truth is truth based upon who you are and but you got to get to know who you are in order to know what is right for you. Next image. And so, of course, we will go into this. This will be a whole another talk. We have, of course, the chakras. Once again, this connects to an inner form of mysticism. Next image. And even more heightened one is known as the Kundalini. And so, again, these are all mystical conceptions. Okay, next image. So we move on to Greece and Rome. We move on to the Eleusinian mysteries. This is another mystical kind of form here. Now, the Eleusinian mysteries are interesting in a mystical sense because besides being established at one and then two specific times a year, it was highly regulated to the degree that mystical experiences were guaranteed in the end, not to just one individual at a time, but to thousands. By the time of the Roman Empire, not only were men, but women and slaves and foreigners admitted into the Eleusinian mysteries. Next image. And so here you have, of course, the Eleusinian mysteries are focused upon Demeter, as well as Persephone, and you can see this here. In fact, what I want to do is I'd like to talk a little bit, so thank you. So on the 14th of Bodrano, holy objects, Hera, were brought to Athens in large round baskets called kistai. On the 16th, following a cry that was made to the sea or mistai, each Mistes took a bath in the sea together with his piglet, according to Plutarch. Pigs were the principal sacrificial animal for purification and worship of Demeter, sacrificed immediately after their bath in the sea, and is meant to, of course, obviously, whatever sins or negativity you had was transferred onto the pig. And eventually, of course, they make the great trek 14 miles away to Eleusis. This journey took a long time. It went into the evening, so people are holding torches. But the most awe-inspiring, here we go, and transformative moment in the Eleusinian mysteries occurred when the initiates entered the inner sanctum and beheld a great light, megaphos. They were called to this epiphany by the Hierophant, sounding a type of gong that's used to imitate the sound of thunder in various Greek theatrical performances. Plutarch mentions at this pinnacle occasion, he compares it with the initiation to philosophy. He says as follows. He says, just as persons who are being initiated into the mysteries throng together at the outset amid tumult and shouting and jostle against one another, but when the holy rites are being performed and disclosed, the people are immediately attentive and in awe and silence. So too at the beginning of philosophy. About its portals also you will see great tumult and talking and boldness, as some boorishly and violently try to jostle their way towards the repute it bestows. But he who has succeeded in getting inside and has seen a great light, as though a shrine were open, adopts another bearing of silence and amazement, and humble and orderly attends upon him, reason as upon a god. So you have this mystical moment, a preordained, guaranteed mystical moment that is transformative within the Eleusinian mysteries, which does make it something that is quite fascinating, you know. So what happens here, while the initiates, what they saw exactly was a mystery, but there are some clues connecting the reports of Apollodorus and Hippolytus. Walter Burkert concludes, I'll show a picture. The Mystes sees Kor, that's being Persephone, who is called up by the Hierophants by the stroke of a gong. As the underworld opens up, terror gives way to joy or reunion. Then the Hierophant announces a divine birth. The mistress has given birth to a sacred boy, Brimo Elbromos. Finally, he displays the ear of corn cut in silence. That the Mystes saw an image of Kor, next image, in some form is a distinct possibility. A papyrus fragment from Milan depicts Hercules stating of the Eleusinian mysteries. He says, I was initiated long ago. Lock up Eleusis, Hierophant, and put the fire out. Didakos, deny me the holy night. I have been already initiated into the more authentic mysteries. I have beheld the fire whence, and I've seen the core. Carenier refers to another obscure passage from Sopastris, which, if it has been properly corrected, a figure rose from the ground, above the ground. So you have an image here. So once again, the Eleusinian mysteries has within it guaranteed mystical experience that can be repeated. Next image. Of course, you also have the rites of the Magna Mater, which is celebrated on March 15th and the 25th. A certain ecstatic ritual was observed during the culmination of the morning cycle of Attis. At a certain point during this day, the high priest gave a signal to his Gali, and they commenced an ecstatic dance that circumnavigated a sacred pine representing Attis. Next image. Falling into a frenzied state, To the accompaniment of clarinet and cymbals, the Gali began to cut themselves with knives as they twirled in their dance of madness, with their consecrated blood spraying all over the tree and onto the altars. So they also beat their breasts with sharp pine cones, shedding still more blood, with the dance reaching a feverish pitch. The feeling of divine madness is described descending upon the crowd. Now, all of a sudden, a mystical experience is occurring. Already susceptible to suggestion because of their vigilant fasting, prompting many to cross the sacred boundary and join in the manic dancing with the priests. With the sensation of ecstasy gripping their bodies and their minds succumbing to the call of the Magna Mater, the initiates began to mutilate their bodies along with the Gali. The pace of the music now moved more rapidly, the rhythm of the mother goddess taking control. Around and around they went faster and faster, creating a feeling of rising ecstasy, reaching the climax. At this moment, the men, once simply spectators or worshippers from afar, took a piece of broken glass or flint and they removed their members. After their self-emasculation, when the music was over, they had nowhere else to go but join the priesthood. So their entry into the cult of Magna Mater was all about a mystical experience. Next image. There we go. And that's an example. That's one of the Gali represented there in stone. Next image. This is, of course, a subject of another talk, but I cannot ignore that the belief system of Artemis of the Ephesians was, in essence, a very mystical one. It was not necessarily only about rituals, but it was about epiphanies. Artemis was known as the one who gave epiphanies in dreams, but also throughout ancient Ephesian lore, Artemis herself would appear not just before individuals, but before the entire town to give messages. And people really did believe that they saw Artemis with their own eyes. Next image. And of course, because Artemis was known as the one who is connected to the many epiphanies, it is interesting that her cult, her belief system, will spread into another one. Long story really short, Artemis of Ephesus is the goddess of the moon and hunt, but she is also the goddess, the virgin goddess, and that's the Greek connection. But in the Anatolian side, she is the great mother goddess. What will happen is there are two temples in Ephesus, one dedicated to the virgin goddess, connected to the Greeks. The other one connected to the great mother goddess, Cybele, of those of the Anatolian civilization. And under King Croesus of Lydia, they got torn down and they made into one temple. And this, of course, is the temple dedicated to the great virgin mother goddess. Now, out of some strange sense of coincidence or whatever it may be, according to early Christianity, Jesus looked down upon John the apostle and basically said, "Behold your mother," which would be Mary. And so wherever Mary went, or wherever John went, I should say, Mary would go. And early Christian tradition, going back to the 2nd century, states that John went to Ephesus, and the Catholic Church officially sees Mary going with him. In fact, there's a house of the Virgin Mary that Catholic tourists visit today. And Mary is said to rise up or to die, depending on the perspective, in Ephesus. Well, she died right by the sacred Ortygia Gardens, which is where Artemis was said to be born via Leto, along with her brother. And so what happens is it cements the idea of that, here you have a worship of a great mother, a great virgin mother goddess. And it turns out here in Christian tradition, you have a great virgin mother. And, those of Ephesus and elsewhere can't distinguish very much. And so many of the attributes that are connected with Artemis, by the time we get to the Third Ecumenical Council, Ephesus in 431, will just be glued together. And so it's the same rituals. Well, it turns out that Artemis of the Ephesians was known as the goddess of the Epiphanies. So guess what? Very soon after, you have Mary. The first time Mary is ever seen, Epiphanius, it happens to be in Asia Minor. It happens to be Gregory, the miracle worker, in around Pontus region. And of course, what will happen is the mystical attribute of the one who appears in various ways, which was attributed to Artemis of the Ephesians, is now, in a mystical sense, is now transferred to Mary, and we could just put it directly together. But it really gains power after the Ecumenical Council. And from there on out, Artemis Epiphanes will be connected, we'll move the legacy into Mary Epiphany. So interesting stuff, right? But once again, so very much the Mary, we'll see more of this too. The Mary connection to Artemis of the Ephesians it has a very strong mystical cord. Next image. I love this image. It's a modern day image of Artemis connected to the bee. One other point I want to bring up with this image is the fact that Artemis of the Ephesians is very much connected to nature, and she is woven within nature in a mystical sense. So to attune with Artemis is also to attune with nature, and through mystical experiences, you can achieve that sense of oneness. What will happen is that Artemis keeps adding attributes of other goddesses onto her. So as time goes on, she adds on, so Hecate is connected with her, and you, of course, obviously earlier at Cybele, but you also have Isis, to the point where Artemis will be viewed as a universal goddess, connected to universal principles, and even in the philosophical principles, such as for example, Middle Platonism and Neoplatonic ideas, as well as the Chaldean Oracle. So fun stuff. Next image. All right, so this next image is Isis. So much like the cult of Artemis of the Ephesians, the cult of Isis had the expectation that the goddess will personally appear to the worshiper in a very real sense. They will forge a relationship with them and will encourage a very real commitment through initiation, an initiation believed to have direct positive ramifications in this and the next life. In this case, the cult of Artemis of the Ephesians and Isis can be very katabotic as well as anabotic. Next image. Concerning her mysteries, Plutarch states that Isis discloses the divine mysteries to those who truly and justly have the name of bearer of the sacred vessels and wearers of the sacred robes. These are they who within their own soul, as though within a casket, bear the sacred writings about the gods, clear of all superstition and pedantria. And they are cloaked within themselves with secrecy, thus giving intimidation, some dark and shadowy, some clear and bright, are their concepts about the gods. Apulus, next image, in his novel The Golden Ass, here's the image, written in the 2nd century CE, incorporates much about the common beliefs concerning Isis during the Roman era, as well as illustrates much about her mysteries. The main protagonist, Lucius, turns himself into a donkey after misunderstanding Milo's wife performing witchcraft that turned her into a bird. A few hours later, Apulus, who is now the ass, woke up in sudden terror and saw the moon's orb at full shining and dazzling brilliance. I am going to read this passage because this is a great example of a mystical experience connected to Isis. So he saw the moon's orb at full shining with dazzling brilliance emerging from the sea. I knew that cloaked in the silent mysteries of nocturnal darkness, the supreme goddess exercises her greatest power. Her guidance governs human affairs, not only cattle and wild creatures, but even lifeless things being quickened by her power and her light's divine favor. All individual bodies on land, in sea or air, waxing with her as she waxes, and waning in obedience to her waning. So very much connected to the moon and the movements of the moon. Now fate seemed sated with the magnitude and frequency of my sufferings. Obviously, he's upset. Lucius is an asshole. And offered me hope, though late, of deliverance. And I determined on praying to the powerful image of the goddess before me. I swiftly, so what image before him? He is focusing on the moon. So the moon is viewed as the image of Isis. This is good, right? I swiftly shook off sluggish sleep and rose happy and eager. Wishing to purge myself, I ran at once to sea to bathe, plunging my head 7 times under the waves, since Pythagoras declared that number especially fitting for religious rites, and of course 7 connected to the 7 spheres, right? Then my face wet with tears, I prayed to the great goddess, Queen of heaven, whether you are known as bountiful Ceres, the primal harvest mother, who delighted in finding your daughter Persephone again, abolish our primitive woodland diet, showed us sweet nourishment, and now dwell at Eleusis. So there's a reference here that Isis is connected to Eleusis, to Demeter, Ceres, right? To the Eleusinian mysteries. Then he continues, or heavenly Venus, who at the founding of the world joined the sexes by creating love, propagating the human race in endless generation, and worship now in the sea-girt sanctuary of Paphos. There is such a beautiful image of Aphrodite there, made by Praxiteles, that it was said to be too much for some certain men to look at. Or Diana, Apollo's sister, you who relieve the pangs of countless childbirths with your soothing remedies, venerated now at Ephesus. So, of course, a very strong connection to Artemis of the Ephesians. Or dread Persephone herself, she of the night cries, who triple-faced combats the assault of spirits, shutting them from earth above, who wandered the many sacred groves, propagating by a host of rites. I think that's interesting because here you have the three-way goddess, which is also connected to Hecate and the underworld, merged together, Persephone there. O light of woman, illuminating every city, nourishing the glad seed with your misty radiance, shedding that light whose power varies with the passage of the sun, in whatever aspect, by whatever name, with whatever ceremony we should invoke you, have mercy on me in the depths of my distress, grant good fortune, give me peace and rest after cruel tribulation. Let the toil, the dangers I've endured suffice. Rid me of this foul four-footed form. Restore me to the sight of my own people. Make me the Lucius I once was, or if I may not live, if I have offended some deity who hounds me with inexorable savagery, grant me the gift of death. I think it's interesting here. He's basically, there's this appeal to again, to a sense of universalism. Do you see this all the way through? Openness. After this, he says, when I poured out my prayers, next image, ending them in pitiful lamentation, my fainting spirit sank back, once more engulfed in sleep. I had scarcely closed my eyes when a divine apparition appeared, rising from the depths of the sea, her face worthy to be adored by the gods themselves. Slowly she rose, till her whole body was in view, shaking herself free of the brine to stand before me, a radiant vision. If the poverty of human speech allows me, if the goddess herself grant me a wealth of verbal inspiration, I shall try to describe her marvelous beauty to you. Of course, she may be beyond description. We see this in various mystical encounters, but Lucius is going to try, right? Firstly, her long, thick hair is tapering ringlets was loosely spread over her divine neck and shoulders, and her head was crowned with a complex garland of interwoven flowers of every kind. At the center over her brow, a flat disc-like mirror, or rather a moon symbol, shone with a brilliant light, once again connected to the moon, right? Coiled vipers reared from the right and left of her coronet that were bristling with the erect ears of corn, which is the symbols of Isis, right? Her multicolored robe was of finest linen, gleaming here pure white, here a saffron yellow, there a flaming rose red, with a woven border flowing with flowers and fruit. And what dazzled me most of all was her jet black cloak with its full sheen, wrapped gleaming about her, slung from the left shoulder, knotted at the breast, and sweeping over her right hip, the famous Isis knot, of course. It hung in sweetly undulating complex folds down to a tasseled fringe, and along its border and over its surface fell a scatter of glittering stars. So she's connected to the heavens. Isn't that beautiful? Round a full moon at the center, breathing fiery rays, and she bore a host of emblems. In her right hand, she held a sistrum, next image, a strip of bronze, curved in a loop with small rods across its width that made a tinkling noise as her forearm shook to a triple beat. From her left hand hung a boat-shaped vessel of gold, an asp with a neck rearing to strike from the outer point of the handle. Her ambrosial feet wore slippers woven from palm leaves, emblems of victory, and such a guise exuding all sweet scents of Arabia, she deigned to address me with a celestial voice. So here you have a much like the details that you would see, for example, of Ezekiel seeing a wheel within the wheel, right? Vivid details. This is why I'm taking the time to go through this. A mystical experience doesn't have to be something that is vague, that's something that I can't remember anymore, that's shadowy. For Lucius, as you see in many other encounters, it's something that is seen in technicolor. It's something that's very defined, that's burned within the mind. And you can see if this kind of activity happened to you, of course you would believe that this is true over those who are saying that it's not. If you experience something like this and really believed it, who are others to tell you it didn't happen, especially in this much detail? Of course, we're going back to those 6 different personality types, right? So what happens? She's going to speak. She says, "Behold, Lucius, here I am, moved by your prayers, I, mother of all nature and mistress of the elements, firstborn of the ages and greatest of powers divine, queen of the dead and queen of the immortals, all gods and goddesses in a single form." There it is. All gods and goddesses in a single form. Again, this universalism, so you have with going on at this time during the 2nd and 3rd century, you have this idea that the goddesses reflect this ultimate goddess. So you have more of a centralization going on. Not going to say monotheistic, but there's things happening here when it comes to attributes, but it's still something that he's experiencing through a mystical experience. And that experience is that all of these goddesses are ultimately one, okay, from his perspective. Who with a gesture commands heaven's glittering summit, the wholesome ocean breezes, the underworld's mournful silence, whose sole divinity is worshipped in differing forms, with varying rites under many names by all the world. Again, this is now connecting that, hey, everybody is worshiping her. They may not know it, but they are in different forms by many names. There at Pessinus, the Phrygians, firstborn of men, call me Cybele, mother of the gods. In Attica, a people sprung from their own soil, name me Cecropian Minerva. In sea-girt Cyprus, I am Paphian Venus, Dictaean Diana to the Cretan archers, Stygian Persephone to the 3-tongued Cilicians, at Lucius, ancient Ceres, Juno to some, to others Bellona, Hecate, Rhamnusa, while the races of both Ethiopians, first to be lit at dawn by the risen sun's divine lights, and the Egyptians too, deep in arcane lore, worship me with my own rites, and call me by my true royal Isis. I am here in pity for your misfortunes. I am here as a friend and helper. Weep no more, and your lamentations banish sorrow. With my aid, your day of salvation is at hand. So listen carefully to my command. So you have, this is a very big momentous epiphany, all right? In fact, she goes on, from time immemorial, the day born of this night has been dedicated to my rites. On this coming day, the winter storms cease. And so she's connecting here as this goddess of nature. Of course, it goes on. So he's told to do things. Next image. And what is he told to do? Well, he's told to do a few things, a few instructions, but in the end, he's told to go to a temple dedicated to Isis, and to go to a certain priest, and that priest will, of course, then make him into his old self again, and he's glad about that. But there's more. There's more. Next image. I like this one. You can see the mysteries here of Isis. It's a great image from Pompeii. So in the initiations, now as Lucius, he suddenly becomes a different kind of mysticism. I'm going to read this here. So, as for the special mysteries of initiation into the cult of Isis, he says as follows. Appius writes, I duly observed all this with reverence and restraint, the instructions given that were pretty long by Isis. And now came the evening destined for my appearance before the goddess. The sun was setting, bringing twilight on, when suddenly a crowd flowed towards me to honor me with sundry gifts in accord with the ancient and sacred rite. All the uninitiated were ordered to depart. I was dressed in a new-made robe of linen, and the high priest, taking me by the arm, led me into the sanctuary's innermost recess. And now, diligent reader, you are no doubt keen to know what was said next and what was done. I tell you, if to tell you were allowed. What? Wait, what? If you were allowed to hear, then you might know. But ears and tongue would sin equally, the latter for its profane indiscretion, and the former for their unbridled curiosity. He's not going to say what happened. He's going to hint at what happens. What is the mystical experience? He says, oh, I shall speak, since your desire to hear may be a matter of deep religious longing, and I would not torment you with further anguish. But I shall speak only of what can be revealed to the minds of the uninitiated without need for subsequent atonement. Things which, though you have heard them, you may well not understand. And so he's kind of doing this double speech. So for those who've been initiated, go, oh, I know what he's talking about. For those who are not, they're not. But it is a mystical experience, but it's one that you can't say, or it loses its power. So he says, so listen and believe in what is true. I reached the very gates of death and treaded Persephone's threshold, yet passed through all the elements and returned. I have seen the sun at midnight shining brightly. I have entered the presence of the gods below and the presence of the gods above, and I have paid due reverence before them. He had an epiphany of light. He went to a place of death, went to the underworld, in a sense, died there, saw the light, and rose up. We do know that the rites of Isis does include baptism, which, of course, you're kind of connecting with Christianity. Yeah, that was one of those rites. He goes on, he said, when dawn came and the ceremony was complete, I emerged wearing 12 robes as a sign of consecration. Sacred dress indeed, though nothing stops me from speaking of it, since a host of people were there and saw me. As instructed, I stood on a wooden dais placed at the center of the holy shrine before the statue of the goddess, conscious of my fine, elaborate linen. And so he goes through this transformation. But what else does he see? Isis supplies that information, and you'll be surprised. Isis says to Lucius before, as the ass, he says, remember one thing clearly, though, and keep it locked deep within your heart. The life that is left to you, to the final sigh of your last breath, is pledged to me. It is right that all your days be devoted to she whose grace returns you to the world of men. Under my wing, you will live in happiness and honor, And when your span of life is complete and you descend to the shades, even there in the sphere beneath the earth, you will see me, who am now before you, gleaming amidst the darkness of Archaron, queen of the Stygian depths, and dwelling yourself in the Elysian fields, and you will endlessly adore me, and I will favor you. Know too that if by sedulous obedience, dutiful service, and perfect chastity are worthy of my divine grace, I and I alone can extend your life beyond the limits set by fate. So you have, wow, right? So you have this rebirth. You are, in a sense, you die, you come back again, you've seen the light, and you're thinking, this is the ISIS. But yeah, you can see this in so many different belief systems. Okay, let's go to the next image briefly. Of course, Zoroastrianism has mysticism. Of course, the motif of God revealing himself to one person who is designated as a prophet is very common, and Zoroastrianism is no exception, which is founded by the Persian prophet Zarathustra, known as Zoroaster in Greek, who at the age of 30 believed to receive a unique revelation from God, who he called Ahura Mazda. Again, this is a revelatory belief system. Next image. And what of ancient Judaism? Within ancient Judaism, access to God in a mystical sense was clearly for a select few when it comes to mysticism. So you're going to have like Abraham, right? You're going to have this image right here, by the way. This is Enoch. And I want to bring up Enoch. This is the pre-Diluvian period of time before the flood. And talk about mystical expression. In this case, because of the actions of Enoch, because he was righteous, he walked before the Lord, and then he was not, that he was brought up into the heavens. So the idea is that your good actions, your good ethics can lead to the purification of yourself to the point where if you're so perfect, you can go directly to God. Well, that is a mystical experience. Next image. Of course, you got Abraham and his various dreams and visions, that his descendants will be numbered as many as the stars, right? The next image. Of course, you got Moses, and the mystical experience of the burning bush, right? Very much, and that vision led him to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt and towards the promised land. Next image. Of course, talk about mystical experiences. You got Moses there receiving the Ten Commandments about Mount Sinai. And mystically, written, of course, by the finger of God. This is definitely a individual mystical experience. So is it anabotic or is it katabotic? Ding, 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 test time. So is Moses reaching towards God, or is God reaching towards him? I'm not going to answer that question. I just want you to turmoil with it. Next image. I'm nice. Next image, of course, you got of course, Jacob's ladder. Again, having this vision in his sleep, ascending and descending the angels from heaven above. Next image. Oh, and of course, what about Elijah, right? Excuse me, Isaiah. That's Isaiah. Isaiah receiving the special message, and so the epiphany. He's being, in the sense, Messiah, right? The anointing presence of God and knowledge is being given to him, and it is sweet to the mouth, but it is bitter to the stomach. And so what happens is that this anointing, this mystical anointing, enables him to have a direct connection to God. So whatever, and of course he becomes supposedly a great prophet as a result of that. Next image. Of course, you got Elijah, and he's, again, mystical ascent, taken up into heaven. Again, a fiery chariot here. Next image. And we got to remember, it's like, but what about we have individuals having a mystical experience. What about a communio? What about the group? Well, the group does have a mystical experience, and that happens to be, as you can see here, in Exodus 13:21-22. By day, the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel by day or night. So there you have, in a sense, a group mystical experience, but beyond their comprehension. They don't have no idea how this operates. Next image. There it is by night. Next image. But then we get into Christianity. Now, I want to look at this for a split second, and I want to talk here. The communal form of mysticism by Diesmann is placed within the context of the ecclesia, within the church itself, and the corpus Christi, right? The body of Christ, especially in correlation with baptism and the Eucharist, right? And so let's talk. Let's look at me for a few seconds here. So there is very much a mystical connection here. You have here the idea that Jesus will be understood as this prototype, right? That we do the imitatio of Christi, imitating God in our behaviors, but also we go through this idea of baptism. Now, the baptism, it's a transformation. It's a mystical experience, according to early Christians. Now, it's interesting that it is viewed that way by early Christians, but it is not necessarily viewed that way by certain Christian groups today. So it is believed that what happens is the moment that a person is baptized, it is how do I put this? It is a bridal bath. So you have this within the New Testament, other writings, the rites of the bridal chamber. And the concept is that you are being married to Christ, that you are the bride of Christ, and that baptism is the nuptial bath, the moment of, in a sense, going through the bridal chamber and going through that marriage. And the seal is being connected, of course, through the Holy Spirit. You have that. Also, another idea is the concept that it represents the flood. So the idea is the flood destroys the old and the waters wash away, and you have that which is new. You have this concept of regeneration. You have this idea that you die to yourself and you come back again. What is fascinating about that perspective is that we see that concept within so many different mystical belief systems amongst the Greco-Roman religions. It's almost ridiculous, where you have this idea that you have to die and then come back to life again. In fact, we saw a demonstration of that in the cult of Isis, but we have that others as well. So you go through this transformation, and it's believed that there is something that changes, that this mystical moment, in some cases, it is believed that the Holy Spirit of God enters you upon belief. Others believe that there's a special sanctification that happens at the moment of baptism. Again, you have Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant perspectives. I'm not going to be going into that. I'm just saying that in ancient times, it was viewed as a mystical experience where you die to yourself and live in Christ. That what happens is that mystical moment purifies, or in a sense forgives the understanding of your sins, so that you can go to heaven, right? So you have this idea. Now let's move into the next image, and that is the idea of communion. So Catholics call it transubstantiation. So again, the time of the Eucharist, a time of a celebration, is understood as a mystical experience. There is something magical and mystical going on. If this is within ancient belief systems, within Catholic Christianity during the Middle Ages, and amongst many Catholics today, they believe that they participate in something that's greater than themselves. They are participating in the mystery of God. They are connecting to some transformation. And so the idea that the wine will, upon the ringing of the bell, upon this particular ceremony, the wine will then change its substance, transubstantiation, in a very mystical sense, into the body of Christ. The presence is there. It is believed that the bread, through this mystical moment, will become the body of Christ. Literally, the substance actually changes. But so that's mystical with the objects. What about, well, it's believed that special grace, that presence of Christ at that moment, fills the entire ecclesia, the entire church, that you're participating of that. And when you participate that, you're participating of not only the crucifixion, but also the grace given as a result of that sacrifice. This is mysticism in the extreme. It's communal form, as Adolf Diesman will argue. It's a group mysticism, group mystical experience. And when you leave it, you are filled, in a sense, with that grace, with a belief that you are connecting to, even literally in an energetic sense, in a physical sense. I want to demonstrate that this. I know if you happen to be a priest watching, you're going, oh, finally somebody's telling us this. But many of those outside of Catholic tradition don't know this, so I want to bring this up. If you come from an Eastern Orthodox tradition, what's going on is that we don't know. It's called a mystery, mysterion. It's a mystery, so we don't know, but we know that it is something that we participate in, that it does give us a special grace. It is a mystical moment. It's a communal one that holds people together. Then you're moving into Protestant traditions. You have, if you're Lutheran, it's called consubstantiation. Consubstantiation is that something happens, that there's something spiritual happening to the elements, not necessarily they're turning literally into the body or the blood of Christ, but something's going on energetically, and that you're participating in that. So if you're Lutheran, you're going, yeah. If you come from a Calvinist tradition, then it's symbolic. That it's a symbol, it's a memory, it's commemoration to the moment of the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. And in that case, there is no, in the Calvinist system, there's no actual mystical situation, except for that which is in the heart, right? So you have these different versions, but this is definitely a communal mysticism. Okay, there you go. Next image. All right, so what do we do here? I want to go here. This is mysticism at its best, and most people don't know this, so here we dive into it. Now, also, the confirmation of the human towards the divine, under Diesman's definition of communal form and mysticism as opposed to the unio form, is evident through the New Testament writings. In many passages, the believer is to become transformed into the image of Christ, and many of these very same passages exhibit more than mere emulation, moving to downright mystical transformation. A good example of this is found in 2 Corinthians 3:18. It says, "But we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as from the Lord, the Spirit." Okay, you've heard this before. "But we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as from the Lord, the Spirit." But you're looking at the word, is beholding in the mirror, and you see a word, and it's kataptotrezomenoi. And you see that, see, beholding in the mirror, kataptotrezomenoi. That's interesting. Well, if you take a look, it means if it's kataptotrezo, this is, of course, in the active voice. This means actually means to produce a reflection. To produce a reflection. Plutarch's Morality says it produces reflection. It doesn't say kataptotrezo. It says kataptotrezo menoi. Menoi, that's added on, that's a present middle participle. And what it is a menoi, when you do a middle voice, it's reflexive. So as opposed to I reflect this idea, or reflect upon this idea, it will be adding the menoi, it will be I reflect upon myself. He reflects upon himself. She reflects upon herself. We reflect upon ourselves. You see how that works. So this is a middle. And so this means something different. This means that we ourselves are reflecting upon ourselves this image. What does this mean? This means that, yes, you have this idea of the idea of katabatic, where God is reaching down. But because it's a middle, it has this idea of anabatic, which means that we are reaching up. And so the idea is that both are reaching together to become the image. That is the very definition of contemplation. And so the concept is that we are transforming. It's not only being done to us from above, but we are involved in the process moving upwards. And that is a very different idea that you'd have to know Greek to understand. And there's another word here too. I just want to look at this. By the way, the Vulgate translates this as speculantis, which of course is Tertullian says contemplate. So there it is. Also, I must stress, if we use Diesman's model here, obviously, you can see that it is both the acting mysticism and the reacting mysticism. There is this mystical idea. But look at this here, the image. Take a look at the word, and you see the word icona or icon. So this image, it's a likeness, it's a form, it's appearance. And so Philo used it in a Platonic fashion, expressing the thought that, first of all, is an image that proceeds from God, which in turn serves as a model for man. So we are involved, we are reflecting upon this image, this emanating image that comes from the monad above. We're reflecting upon it, and we are being transformed. Once again, very much mysticism, and of course, we move on. So we have instances of this, but again, it's hardly ever recognized. Go to the next image. So communal mysticism is mysticism within certain parameters. The individual, while enjoying fellowship with God, being sanctified through God, even being conformed to the image of God, is still prostrate before this very same deity as a separate and unique individual. So we've got to keep that in mind. The life of Jesus exhibits one mystical experience after another. He is believed direct relationship with God, understood to manifest such miracles as walking on the water, casting out demons, healing the sick, and talking to God upon the Mount of Transfigurations with Moses and Elijah with him. According to the Gospel of Matthew, so accordingly, states that Jesus was transfigured before them, and that his face did shine as the sun, and his raiment was white as the light. So you have this transformation. Next image. Furthermore, when Peter proposed to set up 3 tabernacles for Jesus, Moses, and Elijah, a bright cloud overshadowed them, And behold, a voice out of the cloud, which said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear ye him." And so the light of God, this is important, the light of God was understood to be visible to the physical eyes. After this, Jesus told them, "Tell this vision to no man until the Son of Man be risen again from the dead." I want to state this is so important. So they see a light. The disciples, Peter, James, and John, actually are believed to see this particular light, and this light is transformative. Oh, look at me for a few moments. So what? Where are you going with this? Quite a bit. Because what will happen is that this is the beginning, a very strong beginning, to Eastern Orthodox mysticism. This is where it starts, right here. Because what will happen is that these disciples were able to see the uncreated light of God. They're able to see it with their own physical eyes, not through closing the eyes and through visions, not through dreams. This is through an actuality. And so many of Greek Orthodox theologians, we'll talk about them lightly a little bit later on, will believe that this is literal, that if you are truly striving to be close to God, that you should be able to see the uncreated light of God. And so this will become a focus. And so what will happen is that as time goes on, this will bring about what's called the hesychast prayer, which is still practiced today within Eastern Orthodoxy. And this is the Jesus prayer. May the Lord Jesus Christ have mercy upon me. You say it over and over again. You do this meditation, and you see the uncreated light from the Mount of Transfigurations, supposedly within your own, in reality. And so, yeah. So kind of important moment there. So we'll go there into the details, but I just kind of want you to know what we're going. Okay, the next image. Another important moment is the arrival of spiritual gifts on the day of Pentecost. Mentioned in the Acts of the Apostles, including the ability in speaking in tongues of prophecy. It's most definitely a mystical experience of the highest degree. Here, the belief that Jesus, through his crucifixion and resurrection, mitigated through himself a spiritual sacrifice and so atoned for all sin, resulted in the Holy Spirit able to enter those who accepted this fact verbally in the faith and through the act of baptism. One then is literally possessed by this Holy Spirit to act as an inner guide, a divine consciousness in daily life, and to ultimately reunite with Jesus and the Father in the afterlife. So this is, again, mysticism to the highest degree that fits all of Diesman's definitions. Next image. This is an ancient image. The tongue's coming down. I thought this is a really good one. You can see there. And by the way, this is the communal form of mysticism, group mysticism, where more than one person is experiencing the state of altered consciousness, so to speak, and through something that is understood as some kind of physical manifestations, as well as signs and wonders that connect with it. Miracles, right? So there you have it. Next image. And then we get to a fascinating topic, and that is Clement of Alexandria. And of course, Clement will better articulate this idea of theosis. And so we will go there. We'll take down the image, but that's a good one. Good start on that. So for Eastern Christianity, here we go. To understand theosis is to keep in mind three main points. First of all, one must realize that the logos, the word, in the beginning was the word was with God, right, is the agent of both revelation and knowledge. And this agency is undeniably evident in God's natural attributes and is obviously due to the inherent weakness of the dark material world. In essence, you don't recognize this power only because you don't wish to see it. It should be real obvious. Second, for Clement of Alexandria, writing in the 2nd century, from Alexandria, right? Each person needs to learn to reach a state of apatheia. Now, apatheia, I'll bring this up. Apatheia, of course, we have this root as the word apathetic and go, oh, he's apathetic, he doesn't care. That's not what it means. Apatheia in this Greek understanding means serenity of purpose. It means the idea of opening up, being vulnerable, and waiting for something to occur. For only after achieving such a state can an individual become completely open to the knowledge of God as revealed through the Logos. So you enter the state of apatheia. Now, this meditative concept of serenity of purpose is not just a Christian thing. This idea we see also in Eastern mysticism. It shouldn't come as any surprise because obviously Clement of Alexandria, from Alexandria, which is the crossroads between not just the area of the Mediterranean, but there's a connection also moving down towards India. By the time of the Emperor Claudius, they had figured out the monsoons. There was a whole section of town that was people from India. And as it turns out, Clement of Alexandria's teacher, Petaneus, according to Clement, actually journeyed to India and came back. So you have these ideas from the East permeating into Western thought. And this idea of surrender, of waiting, of opening up is not just a Western idea with a Western bias. It is also an Eastern idea. The other thing I want to bring up is that this idea will also be influential within certain Sufi movements and within Rumi. So once again, this is important. That means in Islam, mystical Islam will also have this idea, futa, right? The idea of, in Arabic, I just said, it means the opening up. So apatheia, you'll have that, but you also have the same concept. So these are concrete concepts that seem to cross through the trade routes. So apatheia. Now, third, once the Logos is recognized and the soul has reached the state of apatheia that is able to receive the revelations of the Logos, which represents divine knowledge. So if you don't want to think of it in a Christian concept, it's the idea of knowledge, of, almost like a jnana yoga kind of idea, right? The soul then opens up enough to be filled with truth, like an empty vessel, transforming the mind along with the body as the soul rises towards God, or nous, as the Gnostics will say, revealing the perfect. And so arriving at a state of theosos. Theosos, people in the West always translate this incorrectly, but and the Greek Orthodox use it. They use as the Greek theosos, but they translate it as, in the West, as deification. The reason why they say that, a deification, you're becoming divine. And of course, I have to blame a lot of theologians of the West for applying this word, which is not exactly what it means, but it does mean that you have the deity and the energies of the deity mixing with you, but it doesn't mean that you are becoming the deity. So there's still a concept of separation. It doesn't take that next step that you will see within the Eastern tradition, Eastern mysticism. It doesn't take that next step to full deification, but it's the idea of emerging or connecting. How so? The best way, again, the Eastern Orthodox will talk about this, is we're back to the Mount of Transfigurations. Peter, James, and Saul, they witnessed to and were consumed and filled with the energy of God. So they can connect to the energy of God. They can see the energy of God, but they cannot become the essence of God. They can see, in a sense, connect to the rays of the light, the emanations, but they can't, in a sense, identify and become one with the ousia. The word will be ousia, the ousia of God. So there's a difference there. Thus, for Clement, the salvation of humanity is directly correlated with the process of sanctification into perfection. One does not become perfect, but one is going through the process of becoming more perfect. Now, of course, this purification process of sanctification is known as catharsis. Catharsis in Greek. So we get the word catharsis in English. The resulting illumination resulted from this purification is known in the Greek as theoria, which of course eventually results in theosis or divinization. But you don't become a god, but you do participate with that energy, but you do not become part of the Ousia essence. Got it? But so there you have it. Next image. So Clement of Alexandria goes there, bringing these ideas with him. Next image. And now later on, I kind of laugh at this one. Later on, this ascent, you got to love it. You get the Middle Byzantine thought, and they're going, this ascent, they always have to make the ascent more difficult than it should be. Well, Clement of Alexandria makes this nice little happy, serene, meditative, almost Eastern feel to it. By the time you get to the 500s, 600s, 700s, they make it like a ladder with all these demons attacking you on the way up. So it's like, yeah, they're going to get you. They're going to pull you down. They even put the idea of you have to go through various toll booths, and and the demons there ask you a question. If you fail, you get thrown down. Looks like some of these people are getting thrown off the ladder. But again, you got to leave it to the later mind to make something beautiful into something less beautiful and more conflict and more guilt-driven. But this is not the intent of Clement of Alexandria. I thought it's a good illustration of this is a mystical kind of conception, but you also have apparently some static interruption, some chaos in there. Next image. Okay, now we have Anthony. Oh, here's Anthony. St. Anthony, he's of Egypt. He's considered one of the first ever monks, or those part of the monastic movement, ascetic movement within Christianity, living from the 200s and the 300s. And so he's connected to these ideas by Clement of Alexandria. Anthony viewed his battle as both outside and within himself, practicing a life of discipline, of ascesis, or we get the word asceticism from that, reaching a state of apatheia, of serenity of purpose that enabled him to experience theosis, resulting in his body literally believed to be glowing, being radiant with light as he communed with God in the here and now. So what happens is that, hey, this light's supposed to be visible. If one is participating in this light, don't I glow too? And this goes back to ideas even related to, let's go see my face. It goes to ideas even related to when Moses had his vision, right, of God. Remember, he saw God, the light, the radiance. He had to cover his face. It's the same idea, It's like, hey, I'm with God. I'm going to glow. And so for the Eastern Orthodox, if you really are a mystic, people think, hey, I think that guy's glowing. I think his flesh is transforming. So what happens is that, here we go. So as a commune with God in the here and now, much of the basis of these ideas of ascesis leading to apatheia, and then in turn leading to theosis, were articulated by the 2nd century Christian philosopher Clement of Alexandria, we just talked about, but also the 3rd century theologian Origen. But now they're put into practice by these ascetics, or at least understood as being putting these ideas in practice. Anthony was the perfect model for other anchorites to follow, for through withdrawal and purgation, transformation was indeed thought possible, an idea early on espoused by Clement of Alexandria and Origen. The aim was more than transformation in the next life. It was also the idea of transformation in this life, to realize, as mentioned by Abbas Macarius, that God is upon earth. The famous story illustrating this, of course, was when Abba Joseph, demonstrating to Abba Lot on how to live a perfect life, he says, then the old man rose and spread out his hands to heaven, and his fingers shone like 10 candles. And he said, if you will, you could become a living flame. And so you have this transformation, this visual transformation where you turn, you glow, you glow in the dark, right? Glowing saints connected to your sanctification. And once again, I want to bring up the halo thing. But, I want to go one step further. It is believed that through this continuous practice, this mystical practice that I brought up from Clement of Alexandria and Origen, it is believed that your flesh will indeed start to transform from the material into the spiritual. And that's why it glows, that it really does affect your actual body. And so you are between, in a sense, the earth and heaven. And so as these pillar saints, like Saint Simeon the Stylite, is standing between heaven and earth, and from those in the east, it is looking like that he's standing this pillar for a couple for a generation, and it looks like to them that he's transforming into the eternal essence, because many of those in the east were advocates of the Gospel of John, which believes in the immediate eschatology. Immediate eschatology is once you believe, you start transforming in the here and now. And so because of this belief, they believe in this more immediate sense of mystikos, this immediate sense of transformation. That unlike you see in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, or the writings of the Apostle Paul, you don't have to wait to the end of time. You don't have to wait until the Great Tribulation and the new heavens, new earth. No, you don't have to wait till then. Immediate eschatology means it's happening now. You're in heaven and you are on earth. Of course, you have even ideas related to the book of Revelation, even though it was not agreed upon by many Johannine circles until you get into the 4th century. You see, have this idea, well, John the Apostle, he appears at the end of time, and he saw it all happen, therefore it's complete. So, yeah, it's immediate eschatology, or just a mystery. Okay, so we move on but you get the idea, move on to Gregory of Nyssa. Let's go to the next image. According to Gregory of Nyssa and the majority of the Eastern Orthodox mystics that follow him, because humanity is to participate in the divine nature, that nature actually changes and purifies us. He states, the divine nature is utterly immune to any participation in evil, and thus possesses the good without limit. When therefore it draws human nature to participate in its perfection, because of the divine transcendent, it must always, in its perfection, because of the divine transcendence, it must always be superior to our nature in the same degree. The soul grows by its constant participation in that which it transcends it, and yet the perfection in which the soul shares remains ever the same, and always discovered by the souls to be transcended to the same degree. So you're having this transformation. You're having this idea that, hey, and so what will happen is that, yeah, we have the story, the big story of the mystical moment of the Mount of Transfigurations. But guess what? Gregory, well, he adds something to it. I've done some studies on this and comparing him also with William of Theory on the same conception. And that is the fact that he adds now onto that same table, he adds that the mystical moment on Mount Sinai, that we are to also be not only like Peter, James, and John before the Mount of Transfigurations, with of course beholding of course obviously the energy or energeia of Jesus as he's going through transformation. We're also to be like Moses upon Mount Sinai and having that same similar experience. So you're just kind of adding a little Old Testament onto that. Next image. Concerning the mystery, Gregory of Nazianzus, 329 to 390, often speaks of the mysterious Godhead, declaring, again, my Jesus, and again a mystery, not deceitful, not disorderly, nor belonging to Greek error or drunkenness. And so he talks about the fact that, therefore, listen to the voice of God, which sounds so exceedingly clear to me, whom I both a disciple and master of these mysteries, as would be God. I am the light of the world. Therefore approach him, you to him, enlighten, and let your faces not be ashamed, being signed from the true light. So Gregory will stress what I want to say as light theology, L-I-G-H-T, not L-I-T-E. Illuminating the equation between God and the concept of light, right? That's important. In his oration on the Holy Baptism, presented on January 6, 381, Gregory of Nazianzus states, God is light, the highest, the unapproachable, the ineffable, that can neither be conceived in the mind nor uttered with the lips, that gives life to every reasoning creature. Right there, I mean, come on. This is, again, describing a mystical state. He is the world of thought, what the sun is in the world of sense, presenting himself to our minds in proportion as we are cleansed. You see the purification there, the catharsis, and loved in proportion as he is present to our mind, and again conceived in proportion as we love him. Wow, so much going on here, right? So himself contemplating and comprehending himself, contemplating and comprehending himself, and pouring himself out upon what is external to him. That light, I mean, which is contemplated in the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, whose riches in their unity of nature and the one outleaping of their brightness. This is just pay dirt, right? This is great. You can see everything we talked about coming together in these few sentences. This light shared between members of the Trinity was exchanged through contemplation, through the mind of God. Therefore, those who chose to participate in the divine nature must also contemplate, must meditate upon him. But this light of God was not only perceivable through spiritual eyes. No, this transformative light could be visible to the physical eyes through God's grace, as revealed in both the Old and New Testaments. Let's go to the next image. Gregory of Nazianzus states, it was light that appeared out of the fire of Moses when it burned the bush indeed, but did not consume it, to show its nature and to declare the power that was in it. And it was light that was in the pillar of fire that led Israel and tamed the wilderness. It was light that carried up Elijah into the chariot of fire, and yet did not burn him as it carried him. It was a light that shone around the shepherds when the eternal life was mingled with the temporal. It was light that was the beauty of the stars that went before Bethlehem to guide the wise men's way, and to be the escort of the light that is above us when he came upon us. Light was that Godhead which is shown upon the mount of the disciples, and a little too strong for their eyes. Light was that vision which blazed out upon Paul, and wounding his eyes, healed the darkness of his soul. Light is also the brilliancy of heaven to those who have been purified here, when the righteous shall shine forth as God, and God shall stand in the midst of them. So you have, wow, so quite a bit on this light theology. Well, let's look at me for a little bit. So what will happen here? What will happen here is, is Gregory, with his light theology, starts spreading his ideas. Long story really short, you have the Nicene Creed. It was agreed upon, and then 3 years later, it fell apart when Arian was supposedly being forgiven. And then what happens is that what the Arians actually win the day and take over the Roman Empire, much of it, especially under Constantius, the son of Constantine. And so what will happen is now those who, theologians, specifically the three Cappadocians, Gregory of Nyssa, Gregory of Nazianzus, and Basil the Great, they are trying to bring back the Nicene Creed. And slowly but surely, they start winning the day, and they eventually end up, Gregory Nazianzus ends up at Constantinople, where you're going to have a communal mystical experience. This is what occurs, and we'll go there right now. Okay, so what happens is Gregory, with his gift of oration, of preaching, came in handy, since immediately everyone wanted to hear this magnificent preacher when he came to town. As he preached, the small house of prayer began to outgrow its confining walls, and gradually the church began to expand. According to the ancient church historian Sozomen, this church subsequently became one of the most conspicuous in the city, not only for the beauty and number of its structures, but also for the advantages accruing to it from the visible manifestations of God. For the power of God was there manifested and was helpful both in waking visions and in dreams, often for the relief of many diseases and for those afflicted by some sudden transmutation in their affairs. Definitely communio mysticism. The power was accredited to Mary, the Mother of God, the Holy Virgin, for she does manifest herself in this way. The name of Anastasia was given to this church because, as I believe, the Nicene doctrines, which had fallen to disuse in Constantinople, and so to speak, buried by reason of the power of the heterodox, arose from the dead and were quickened, and so forth. And there's somebody who falls in the Galilee and is brought back to life. But here we go. Hey, look, it's an apparition of Mary. And what happens is among signs and wonders, and everybody is having this mystical communal experience, which does win over Constantinople in the end and becomes again the Nicene Creed. So mysticism is has a lot of impact historically. Okay, let's go to the next image. Islam, a little bit here. Oh, well, actually, let's go here for a second. We talked about hesychism. I want to make sure here you see this. Hesychism is a Greek word that means something like stillness or quiet or silence. And so this idea of the theology of light, that we may all participate in this light through a meditative, mystical experience, is encapsulated in this practice. And you can see right here the definition. Let's go to the next image. As a result of, within Islam, as a result of the loss of his friend, the grief-stricken Rumi instituted the spiritual concert known as the Sema, which represented for him not only a religious ceremony, but also the spontaneous manifestations of emotions. To Rumi, Shams, who personified for the philosopher the symbolic image of the divine essence, became the true and pure reflection of Allah's love. In death, Shams transcended his nature, becoming Rumi's spiritual guide, leading Rumi towards perfection and mystical transformation from within his soul. And the two conjoined as one within their shared spiritual state. Because of this identification, Rumi discovered his close friend within himself. He says, although we are far from him in the flesh, without body or soul, we are both one and the same light. You can see him if you so desire, or you can see me. I am him. He is me, O seeker. Rumi believed the veil which separated his beloved Shams, the perfected saint and son of right religion, from himself was merely an illusion. He says, indeed, Shams al-Din of Tabriz is but a pretext. It is I who display the beauty of Allah's gentleness, I. But the resulting Sema, the main dance of the whirling dervishes, is in essence a dance representing the movement from death to life, from mortality to immortality, from Shams to union with the deity. This is another form of mysticism. Next image. Death and mourning over the loss of Shams, as displayed within the Sema, is not unlike the lamentations for Attis on the main day of Qibli cult. Both public displays of mourning represent a progression from the mundane to possession by the deity through an ecstatic dance. For the goddess celebrant, one literally became Attis in order to be filled with divine drunkenness, even to the point of self-castration, while the dervish emulated Shams through his image, experiencing intoxication and possession by Allah. Curiously, both customs emerged precisely within the same geographical context, Central Asia Minor. In the Sema, the dervish wears a white tenure, representing a burial shroud under a hurka, a heavy black garment symbolizing the tomb, with a tombstone reflected in his conical brown hat called a sikh. Following a prayer and the reading of a surah, a chapter from the Quran, the flute, the ney, begins to play as the dancers divide themselves into two half circles, representing the arc of descent, when the soul falls into matter, and the other, the arc of ascent, when the soul awakens, receiving divine illumination and proceeds back to its origins in Allah. After giving proper recognition to the sheikh, the leader of the dancing troupe, bowing and kissing his hand, the dervishes shed their hurkas in an action intended to reflect in the minds of the participants and the spectator alike the exodus of the soul from the confines of the tomb or the body or the matter. Next image. Turning slowly, at first, the dervishes lift their right arm above their heads as an open expression of their desire to accept Allah's special blessing and grace, and the left hand down towards the earth meant to pass this energy to others. Gradually, the tempo of the music becomes quicker as the dervishes spin faster and faster in a dance meant to display the workings of universal law. By the fourth turn, the sheikh enters the circle, representing both the sun and its rays in the middle of a heavenly chorus of planets. This is the quintessential moment of ecstatic union with Allah, the climax of the entire ceremony. Ancient Greek philosophical notions of the journey of the soul are not difficult to detect within this overt symbolism. The spirit-body duality on a cosmic level is both within Platonism and Gnosticism. Concerning the Shema dance, Rumi states, for them it is the Shema of this world and the other, even more the circle of dancers within who turn and have in their midst their own Kaaba. The special holiness, next image, associated with the flute in this ceremony is important to keep in mind, especially Rumi's tale of the reed flute. Listen to this great tale. The prophet told his son-in-law, Ali, mysteries that he had forbidden him to repeat. For 40 days, Ali tried to contain himself. Then, as he could not stand it any more, he went to the country, plunged his head into the mouth of a well, and started to relate all these secrets. During his mystic drunkenness, his saliva dropped into the well. A few days later, a reed started to grow in it. It grew quickly day after day. A shepherd cut this reed, made a few holes in it, and started to play it while keeping his sheep. His playing became famous. Thousands came to hear him and cry with joy at the sound of his music. Even the camels made a circle around him. The story spread quickly, came to the prophet's ear, who asked that the shepherd be brought to him. After a few preludes, everyone fell into ecstasy. These melodies are the commentaries of the mysteries that I told Ali. Thus, if someone amongst the seekers of purity is devoid of purity, he cannot hear the mysteries contained in the melody of the flute, nor can he enjoy it, because faith is pleasure and passion. In this wonderful piece, Rumi relates a story with very solid local associations originating from classic times in Asia Minor, if not earlier. In a similar tale, arriving from nearby Gordian in Phrygia, Apollo, the god of prophecy, is featured as initiating the action rather than the prophet Muhammad. Apollo curses the famous King Midas, whose touch turns all things to gold, hence the phrase, the Midas touch, with ass's ears, since the king chose Marius, a mere satire over God in a musical contest. Much like Ali, Midas's barber was privy to the king's confidence, yet could not stand withholding such an amazing secret. Unable to contain himself any longer, the barber ran into the countryside, found a hole in the ground, and ever so carefully whispered the secret, hoping that at least the earth could hold such a mystery. But he was not so lucky, since reeds growing from the hole betrayed him. Every time the winds blew through the grass, it murmured, King Midas has ass's ears. So you have these stories, they're all kind of threading together. Next image. There's an image of Midas with the ass's ears. And let's go to the next one. Next image. Rumi at this point relates that a shepherd came along, cut the reeds containing Muhammad's secret via Ali's saliva, and formed them into a flute which divulged the divine mysteries, igniting a state of ecstasy in all who heard it and who are pure of heart. This reference is remarkably similar to the legend circulating concerning Dionysus Orpheus, whose frenzied worship, often accompanied by music, was associated with Attis and hence Cybele throughout, yet again, Central Asia Minor. Dionysus was the god of wine and intoxication, igniting mania or madness ecstasy, interpreted as divine possession within his followers. Dionysus Orpheus was directly connected with the mysterious realm of the dead, with his worship centered upon ecstatic spinning dances, ritualized to a certain extent. The origins of this ecstatic cult has been traced by scholars to either Phrygia, Lydia, or the general area occupied by the ancient Hittites. In other words, all the regions in and around Konya and the central Anatolia. Stories relate how Dionysus traveled about the country, either accompanied by flute music or playing it himself, amassing a large following of dancing devotees in a constant state of ecstasy, of mystical enrapturement. Orpheus, the son of Apollo, shares many Dionysian characteristics. Both were also supposed to have been torn to pieces by anger and Maids and so forth. So you have all of these connections coming together. So there you have that. Okay, let's go to Judaism here. We're kind of heading for a close here. Next image. So modern Judaism. First of all, well, I should say ancient Judaism into modern Judaism. You got the Kabbalah. This is another mystical system. The word Kabbalah itself means receiving tradition, and it is applied to a specifically esoteric, mystical tradition within Judaism. Of course, this definition may seem too general for our purposes here, as Judaism has myriads of mystical traditions. So often the current thought is that this label applies to a particular tradition that arose out of Spain and southern France around the 12th and 13th centuries, especially as defined by the mystical text known as Zohar that is so often attributed to Moses de Leon. Next image. Second, for those who embrace Kabbalah, God is the definitive and eternal transcendent one, transcending as in moving from the spiritual realm into the material through his emanations. Yet ultimately, while God is in existence, he is beyond it and eternal, receiving the name Ein Sof. The word Aeon means no thing in Hebrew, substantiating that God is not an object, a thing to be touched or located in any exact position. No, he is beyond yet within, outside yet inside. God is transcendent and immanent within nature. The word Sof means end. So together, Ein Sof means that God is without end. Next image. Those who follow the Kabbalah believe that the world was created with a particular reason, a specific purpose. So why create God? So why did God create the world? What is the reason for existence? In short, God wished to behold God, to contemplate himself, to accomplish this self-reflection of the ultimate God, that which is Ein Sof, without end. He had to limit himself in a way so as to contemplate his own gaze, to create a mirror. But to create this mirror in such a way as to see his own face, he had to fashion something that does not exist, that is tangible, and ultimately that which is first spiritual and then material. This mirror appeared in the void that he manifested. He also had to reduce himself, his eternity, into a limited reflection. Yet it must be remembered that this void that was to show his face was never all-encompassing, as his eternity was beyond this possibility. The rabbis called this act of God to limit himself zimzum, which simply is put as an act of contraction. Okay, next image. Fourth, for those who follow the Kabbalah, as well as in Judaism and Christianity, even in Islam, there's the Islamic Kabbalah and mystical Kabbalah, God is light. The Kabbalah states that God is the Ein Sof, or, meaning the endless light that illuminates the darkness of the void. This divine eternal light is purest and brightest at its source, but becomes less bright as it moves into the void. It was taught that the light descends into the void through emanations from the source. It must be remembered that while God's light is in the world, it does not mean that he is of the world, which the rabbis declared often enough. God's place is in the world, but the world is not God's place. The light of God moved into the world through the power of his divine will, for his light and will are one. And of course, one also can't help but be reminded by the Mount of Transfigurations and the idea also of the mysticism of Clement of Alexandria, and that is, yes, you can, deification is not really deification. You participate within the energies, but you don't become part of its essence. You see this idea reflected here. Next image. Fifth, the world was created as a result of a series of emanations or powers moving from God into the void towards the mirror. As for how these emanations are manifested, the Kabbalah will eventually say that there are 10 of them, each one called a sephara. The ways they are arranged in descending order will be called the images of God, or more frequently, the tree of life. And so you have this idea of emanations. We have this everywhere. Have you noticed that? So we have emanations within not only the within Platonism, but you also have it within the understandings of Christianity and, of course, Islam as well, and Judaism too. 6, despite the belief, next image, this belief in numerous emanations or powers descending from God into the world created along the way, moving from the spiritual to the physical universe, God is still viewed as one and united. The introduction to the Zohar makes it very clear, despite this apparent numbering of emanation via the Sephirot, that God is always united as one. Elijah opened and said, Master of the worlds, you are one, but not in number. You are he who is highest of the high, most hidden of the hidden. No thought can grasp you at all, and there is no image or likeness of you inside or out. And aside from you, there is no unity on high or below, and you are acknowledged as the cause of everything and the master of everything, and you are the completion of them all. And as soon as you remove yourself from them, all the names remain like a body without a soul, always to show you how you conduct the world, but not that you have a known righteousness that is just, nor a known judgment that is merciful, nor any of these attributes at all. Blessed is God forever. Amen and amen. So you got that. Next class. Finally, next one. And of course, oh, well, I guess that was it for that one. I'll just take that down temporarily. St. Francis there. 7, regardless of many other trappings, the Kabbalah is most definitely rooted in the Hebrew Bible, the Torah, which is translated as to mean the law. So there's a connection there. Okay, so we're going to wrap up. I do want to just briefly go over that within Catholicism, you do have, of course, more of this mysticism. So I'll just kind of glide through a few photos, and that'll be it. So let's go to the next one. Obviously, some famous mystics. We got St. Francis, who, of course, heard a voice calling his name and told to rebuild his church. He took it literally. He thought that the actual building that he was looking at of San Dominio at the edge of Assisi, he thought that God was asking him to literally build this church. And so he started collecting field stones and other kinds of masonry to rebuild the church, because apparently he misunderstood. I think this is kind of a funny story, an interesting one, where St. Francis really did believe he heard God say rebuild his church and applied the more localized meaning of it, as opposed to a larger theological, as rebuild his church, as in making it better, when it comes to less corrupt and more focused in the spiritual sense. Next image. Of course, one of the great moments is his stigmata upon Mount Verna, and he's zapped with it. He's being zapped with the stigmata. Once again, this sense of mysticism, this sense of meditation, led to an actual or perceived actual physical transformation. He receives the piercings in his palms and other places, representing, of course, his imitatio Christi, imitation of Christ. And so you have, once again, mysticism, but moving into the realm of the physical, of the literal, which is fascinating, which I wish I could unpack, but we got to keep on going. Next image. There's some zapping right there. How's that? Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Next image. And of course, you have Hildegard of Bingen. And so she also had these various mystical experiences, having what is called the voice of the living God that moved through her, gave her various visions. And so, but of course, she was sick throughout her life. Next image. But of her mystical visions, theological notions that she experienced, she had this very interesting, very fascinating artwork. I think this is pretty interesting right here. Next image. I like this one. I saw this one on the construction of the world. This is humanity is at the center of the nestled spheres. So of her mystical visions and experiences, she put an artwork. Now, next image. Via such figures as St. Francis and Hildegard, the theology of light became popularized through Western Europe within Christendom. Obviously, is already popularized in the East. With that said, occult knowledge of the light and within such mediums as astrology were still prevalent before. While typically biblical figures made their presence known to provide insight, ancient perspectives did continue, such as this plate from the late 500s, which shows that the ancient poet Erotos having a mystical conversation with Urania, the muse of astrology. So you still have these epiphanies, these moments giving insight, in this case, understanding the mystical meanings behind certain astrological configurations. Next image. And of course, you have a few of these other images here. This is the mystical light was depicted as evidence, such as this painting of the Annunciation from the late 1400s, showing 7 rays emanating from the mouth of God. The rays convey the dove of the Holy Spirit going directly within the Virgin's head. Many believe that the soul was literally in the brain. So you have that. Next image. Here's some more zapping. So I love the representation of these kinds of mystical moments. Next image. It's Annunciation as well. You also then, of course, you have the formation of various mystical groups that will sincerely codify these ideas of mysticism as already described, as giving them a sense of autonomy. The Beguines, this all-female movement, these are female mystics, and they so much was focused upon their mystical experiences, contingent and connected to their own personal faith, and gave them a power, a perception, and a sense of independence that they can receive insights from God, but not necessarily having to go always via the church. Obviously, the Beguines will be viewed as heretical later on, but for a while there, they were not only tolerated, but they were encouraged. Also, the spiritual Franciscans were the same as well. Next image. Of course, Saint Teresa and her ecstatic vision, right? It's done in art done in the 1600s. And you can see epiphanies are also connected to feelings that are quite erotic. Next image, which is pretty darn obvious. Next image. So this is where we kind of close out here. So we followed this tangled but beautiful tree that is the mystical experiences, moving from the roots of the past deeply within the human psyche, connecting the earth and wanting to, in many ways, the ancient humanity wanting to connect with the stars and the skies above, connecting with spirits. And we gradually rose up through the trunk and into the branches, spreading out towards the light. And I'm going to bring up a unifying factor. As it turns out, we didn't have a lot of time to talk about Buddhism, but as it turns out, there does seem to be something that pervades most mystical traditions. Here I go. I'm out on a limb here as we look at this tree, and that is light. So many of these systems connect with some sort of vision of light, a light that is transformative. Whether we're talking about the rites of Isis, whether we're talking about the experiences going up to have the revelation of Demeter, at the Eleusinian mysteries, whether or not we are going up and connecting to the crown through the Kabbalic tree, or we're having our experiences with Rumi and through its mystical vision. Whether we have interconnections to ideas related to in Hinduism, to the inner illumination of light, both inside and outside. We also have this within Buddhism. We have this concept of light, exterior and interior, that's transformative. Within ancient Eastern Christianity, we're getting it in Western Christianity. We have this in so many different beliefs, even moving into realms outside of the West, outside of the East, into the realm of the Pacific and so forth. There seems to be something that's very strong with the idea of the power of light to not only illuminate, but to transform us into a mystical state that we seek after. Now, there's many different explanations. I have quite a few that I could think of, but I don't want to do that because I think that this talk is about mystikos. It's about this mysticism that's about seeking after that which is unknown. Of course, I didn't even mention the cloud of unknowing, but seeking after that which is unknown. And I want you to think to yourself, what would be the encompassing principle, the undergirding ideas that hold this notion of the importance of light? Think about that, meditate upon it, and maybe, like William James, maybe there are many answers, and maybe they are all true. Thank you so much.